All right, welcome everyone. It's Brian here with Lewis again today, talking about the auction that we just finished just over 2 weeks ago. Um, Today we're just going to kind of review what we overall saw from the auction, just kind of give people a summary of what types of trends or things that we noticed as a general whole out of the group, and then we'll dive into each individual conference and give kind of things that we liked, didn't like, values, things like that with each individual conference as well. So thanks for joining me, Lou. Um, I guess let's start very broadly with how do you think it all went, even regardless of the auction, it's intricacies of the auctions themselves, from the players or prices or any of that stuff. How do you think it went overall?
I mean, from a behind the scenes standpoint, I feel like this was probably our best effort. I mean, to date. I mean, from the collective, group here of the league, I think at least on our end, not having to chase down, I really don't think it was. I don't want to say it was anybody because I know there were a couple, but like to the extent of what we've had to do in years past, I feel like everybody was either had their stuff together this time or was I don't know, maybe not prepared, but like present, kind of actively, you know, participating either in the auction, in the talk building up to the auction, or around the auction. I think it was just kind of as far as league experiences go. I don't think we could have gotten much better effort and showing than what we did this go around. So I was kind of pleased with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we did a lot better leading up to the auction, getting everyone to be aware and present. I think as we've done this over the years, we've done a better job each year. I think getting people ready. We had a few, I think, kind of expected people that either we just had a checkup on, or that we anticipated would show up to the auction a little later, or kind of wait to play their cards. Um, but I think overall we didn't have anyone just go MIA that we needed to scramble for. People that were not going to be available for different reasons got in touch with us and um, asked us to help support them with what they needed those actions to be. And I think it went pretty smoothly. We also didn't have any hiccups where someone improperly bid or did something weird with the MFL system and like freaked out or had issues that we had to try to fix. So that's always a big plus when we never have those things to go over. Um, so that's great. Kudos to everyone for doing that, for being available, being ready, and then being pretty active. I don't think we really had too much inactivity, even with like I think you. I think we had some common culprits, but they always show up in the end to to the active part of the auction. All right, so
Yeah, I have no idea what that planning is, but no, I think we did good. And to be honest, I don't know if it's we've gotten to the point where like those people that want to be here are here. I mean, I don't really know how to explain it, but it seems like for a league of this size to not have to go chase down. I mean, outside of Army, who I chase down every year, excuse me, an aneurysm. We really don't have to chase down. We didn't have to chase down anybody this year, and I think that really kind of, and we'll get into it, but I think that kind of shows throughout each conference and each individual auction that I also feel greater picture here that in terms of each and every auction that there were some really good auction activity too, and that obviously benefits from having active owners.
yeah, I agree. Um, let's move a little bit into the broader trends of all the auctions. I don't know about from you, but I felt that this year more than, and to your point on it, kind of more of an even playing field where there's not these huge gaps from conference to conference. I thought overall, outside of a few very specific instances, I don't think there was any conference that walked away with like a glut of wealth of assets from inactivity or some really crazy thing happening. I also think another big benefit was what we didn't really have any huge upperclassmen transfer market activity this year. There wasn't really anything notable or big like we've had in ACC for a few years, or like last year with Kansas in the Big 12, where there was just a bunch of talent that was really sought after, and so all this money was being spent in the transfer market or transfer portal. I think that in that lack of supply really also allowed this to be a much more competitive field, because sometimes when you have a lot more transfers, it kind of sucks up some of the funds, and obviously puts the demand in a much different place where one or two teams has a much more robust auction dollar pool. So I don't know if you have any other sentiments on that, and we can kind of talk into broader positional trends too, if you have no other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one spot where you see that is the Bijan Robinson copy in minor, and we'll probably hit on that when we get on the individual conference things. But yeah, no, I mean across the board, and even the players that were in that upperclassmen auction, I think for the most part there were a team here or there that just kind of were willy nilly throwing money at upperclassmen for no reason. But I think the maybe greater understanding now of like what teams should be bidding on upperclassmen in the first place, or like who would an upper class like the Chig Okonkwo's like aren't worth anything. Like you shouldn't be throwing $5-10 on them, and I think we've seen that in the past. And so I think everybody just kind of, for the most part, stayed away from those kind of like trap guys that get tossed out there. Um, as a overall kind of upperclassman, look there. But the other kind of, I mean, big picture things that I noticed was it seemed like, again, I don't know if everybody gets their same material off of the same like three guys off of Twitter or what, but it seemed like a lot of there was a lot of interest in like these seventh round and undrafted running backs. I don't know if it's just like the overall hype of the running back class in and of itself, or if it was just people that were like, oh, I'm not paying for running backs and went after these guys. But there were a lot of people fighting over the same like three or four end of roster type guys, and I just found that interesting.
I think a lot of it ended up actually probably more being a byproduct of there was a bunch of money that certain teams that waited for a certain asset and either missed out or just was late to the party because they were saving this money for like the second copy of Ashton Genty or O'Marion Hampton or something like that happened, where now they waited to blow their load on that one asset piece. They were saving their money, and now they all these other players have gone off the board, and they have to spend it somewhere. And so I feel like we'll get into a few examples of this. I feel have played out much more truly, but I think like those kind of ended up being like the places people put a bunch of money into. I think there was like some really expensive Woody Marks copies or Tootin. Not that they're end of roster like seventh rounder examples that you laid out, but like those types of guys that if you were bidding on them in the beginning of the auction, they're probably not going for nearly the price that they would be at the end of the auction. I think that was a definite example of that. I think also the backup QB market, like the
Yeah.
Milrose, the Shadur Sanders. What was another player that I felt like I don't put Dart in there. I don't put even Tyler Show in there. But like Milrose, Sanders, even some Dalen Gabriels got a little expensive in a few places, and I was a little like pondering why. I thought going in, it seemed like everyone had the same understanding. Like after like Shadur dropped, it almost felt like a given that most rebates would just kind of collect them up, and that would be the price. But I couldn't tell. Like it seemed like some people were really enamored with it. We had a few $30 like Jalen Milrose that didn't even have like a rebate on them, and I'm like, what are we doing? Yeah, that was a little weird in some of these conferences, and it could be that they just really like the upside, and that's what they're paying for. Is some of that upside? But that was an oddity too, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think some of that I think has to do with the Debbie rebate. Even though they don't get that Debbie rebate, I think at least early on, kind of what happens is as players kind of that first wave of players that come off the board are typically Debbie rebate players. And so you'll see this like in the Big 12. I want to say it's Tulsa. I don't even know if he had he had to have had the rebate on one of these quarterbacks he ended up with. I think it was him. I don't want to misspeak, but yeah, he has Dylan Gabriel. I don't know if he had the rebate or not, but
I
it's
don't
just
think
like
so.
one of those. Did he?
No, I don't think he did.
No, but like it goes for like $20, and the only thing that I can sit and think of is
Oh
like
wait, yes,
somebody.
sorry, he did have a rebate on him because
Yeah,
his when
yeah,
a price adjusts, yeah, that's a $0.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So his goes for $20, and it's one of those things where it's just like I'm not. I'm fairly certain that was me. Driving up the price of Dylan Gabriel because I've figured out like some of these guys just playing with them long enough how they operate. Like he definitely threw a $20 bill on Gabriel and just let it ride. Like, and so when I pump it up to $20 to keep his, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yes, he gets his $20 back eventually, but like I've kept $20 from Tulsa off the board for 12 hours, so like it's tied up there. And when that kind of stuff happens, I think the league as a whole, at least the guys that don't have, prep values or prep numbers on these players, they see a $20 Dylan Gabriel come off the board and they're like, oh, like
Oh,
it's a
that's the
steal for me to
price.
get him
Yeah.
for 10,
Yeah,
or it's a
gotcha.
steal for me to get him at 15. And I think we see that early on. Um, Particularly, I want to say like Minor does it a little bit more because Minor's got, uh, well, typically has a little bit more of an expensive touch to them. Um, so when they see players like they're like, okay, a $20 Gabriel in major means that he might be 25, $30 in minor. And maybe Dylan Gabriel is not the best example of that. Maybe it's a Shadur Sanders that's the best example where I think we had more Debbie copies of him, and then the copy in minor I want to say touched like $50. So I think that plays into it to some degree, but it also tends to be, and I've touched on this with you before with certain guys in Big 12 where I'm like, they will not let me win a player. Like they just don't. And when all it takes is two people to sit there and fight over that same guy for whatever reason it is. And I do think that we still have a good bit of that where it's just like stuck on players, don't care about the price point, like just give it to me. And we definitely saw that at quarterback. We saw that at least I feel like at the end, like I said, the end of the running backs, like your running backs from like Darquez Hunter,
Hmm.
um, trying to think of who else, Trevor Etienne. I want to say
Yeah.
we had some expensive copies of him.
Woody Marks, those
Yeah,
guys.
I don't remember if a Devin Neal expensive copy came in there or not, but like even in Ollie Gordon here and there, I was just like, what the hell are we doing? And then just the end of the like pack guys, they're like Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt or whatever his name is, Kyle Monungai. Um, it seemed like everybody just was like after those. Um, Who's the other guy? Brashard Smith, whatever his
Yeah.
name is,
Yeah, he
Kansas City. It just seemed like a lot of people were like, "Oh, we're just going to go after these guys." And again, it's not the end of the world. You're paying $3 here, $5 there, but I think we got a couple copies of those guys that were actually, twice that amount. Which I was just like, give it to something else. I don't know, especially as the end of the uh, that same kind of end of tier wide receiver market was either coming off the board for $0 or are still um, free agents in the league, which I just, that part didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think that definitely some wonky depth definitely happened from there. Um, I think the other big thing was the obvious point that the running back market was the top dollar spend in the conference or in the entire league. There was just an overwhelming amount of dollars spent on like those top 4 to 5. Actually, I'll throw six. I'll put six. I'll put Harvey in there. So Genty, Hampton, Henderson, Judkins, Caleb Johnson, R.J. Harvey, like that market was extremely hot across the entire league. In some places, they were a little cooler on like Caleb Johnson or R.J. Harvey, depending on um, their temperament towards them. But I think overall, everywhere Genty was like the highest copy. Even last year, um, we had Caleb Williams, we had Marvin Harrison. Like those guys kind of flipped and flopped between the highest spend. It was all Genty, and then a bunch of other top running backs were right after him in terms of what was spent the most, outside of maybe like a Cam Ward here or there or Travis Hunter or something. But um, did you expect that running back market to be that hot? I don't know if I expect the height of the running back market to be that hot this year, but it definitely was.
Yeah, yes and no, maybe. I don't know. I think you and I, and I want to say LD, maybe Robbie, a couple others had a conversation. Joey maybe was in there a day or two before the auction started. Just kind of hitting up, where we thought things were going to go, and I think a lot of it, you were sitting there going, RJ Harvey's not going that high. Like, there's no way. And I think you had him down in like a
60,
40
yeah, I was thinking like
$60
$60.
range, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think so. Um, Now, I don't think that I would have, and even when I kind of was projecting some of these, I don't think I had like the 200 plus dollar copies of GNT. I just don't see any player in this format being worth 200 bucks. I just don't. Um, for me, I'd say the max is 150. Like, that's kind of where I top things out. And again, like, if there's a couple dollars there that's going to bump you, maybe 160 gets you the player, 165, whatever. I think that's fine. Um, but for the most part, I think it went how I thought it would go. There were some intriguing cases though for each individual. Like, I want to say, uh, like Arizona State has a stupid expensive copy of Travion Henderson at 139. Um,
And
and I
and
think
he had a
that's
$10
second.
rebate on him too. So
Yeah.
that was even higher
So
as a final auction
right.
price.
And so like the second next most expensive one, I want to say is like $113. So like pretty big gap there. Same thing with Quinshon Judkins. LD spent a shit ton on him. In talking to him afterwards or during the process, I think he may have regretted going that high on Judkins because there was some other value that came off the board in the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 also went very heavy on running back. Like the Arizona State went 208 on GNT, and I think the other Oregon State might have gone heavy too. I can't see who the other copy is. The bubbles are on top of each other, but um, I want to say it was Oregon State. But yeah, no, and they went in the order that I thought they would too, with GNT being obviously the top dog, then Hampton, uh, followed by
I think Henderson was pretty much in third.
Henderson. Yeah, Henderson, Judkins. Uh, I thought maybe we would see some uh, RJ Harvey creep up, behind him, but I think for the most part, it was. I'm trying to figure it out here. I'm trying to look where RJ Harvey is, but I want to say it was um, Caleb Johnson there, then followed with RJ Harvey, kind of like slightly thereafter. But all just kind of in the same category. So I think it was good. I didn't think that it was the RB market was going to extend much past that, but we kind of hit on it already a little bit. I feel like there was like some really expensive like Cam Scattabos.
Mm.
Um, who else kind of came in after there? Um, I'm trying to think because there's a tier drop there, obviously after those guys, but like there were some expensive Cam Scattabos, Tutons, um,
I think
even some like Jaden Blues. That's the other one I was looking
yeah,
for. Like
Jaden Blues, yeah.
Jaden Blue had some copies where I was just like, and you know how I play. I mean, you've played with me for I don't know how many years now. It's got to be.
10, almost 10.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say we're probably on like a 10-year anniversary. We should probably have like a date night or something. But Jaden Blue's the kind of guy that I like. I was in on Tony Pollard before Tony Pollard was Tony Pollard. Same thing with like the Duke Johnsons, the Gio Bernards. Like those are just the guys that I like. One, they're undervalued because they're not workhorse guys. Um, they're them short, fast, little, quick scat running back, receiving backs, and those tend to be what I collect. Um, pretty frequently. And so like I was livid with the price point of Jaden Blue. Like I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Um, at least in Big 12, and I think there were some expensive copies elsewhere. So like that second, like again, not much of a tier there, but like that drop off from those top whatever that was, 4 or 5 guys, and then that next category was just bonkers. And then if you were in the running back market and then needed one, and like the only thing that was left was like one copy of Cam Scatabo or something like that. I think at one point we had a Cam Scatabo that was going to come off the board at like $22, and
It went
somebody
way up.
lost their
Yeah.
running back, and then it jumped like within a matter of minutes to $42. Like it damn near doubled. And you're just like, holy crap! Like I thought I was going to be able to sneak some players off the board. It was like absolutely not. No running backs are being snuck off the board.
I I definitely feel that is a good sentiment. And I think there will be some very specific cases as we go through the conferences of like, oh, the top guys are gone. There's still this established demand based on how that last like player on that tier ahead of them. This team now has money. It's got to put somewhere, and it's going to start putting it on players. And I don't I don't fault them. I do maybe fault the approach that some of these prices maybe shouldn't have gone so high, because then you have some of these teams that are holding such a huge chunk of money so late into the auction. And by late, like late day 2 or mid part of day 2 is kind of late in the auction at this point, where first copies are mostly coming off the board outside of maybe a couple copies of Genti that just got into a really big bidding war, or another player that keeps getting reset. But by the second part of the day, most of the second copies are back up on the board, like the top players are back up on the board and are being actively bidded on, and they're getting into a more mature part of their bidding cycle. And at that point, if you're holding on to money, you need to start looking around the room and start thinking like, where am I going to put these dollars at? Like I think there were a few teams, Louisville, Army, that were just waiting, and I think they were waiting for some value to happen. But what happened was other places that some teams were waiting for that last blue chip player, that last Genti copy, that last Omari and Hampton copy, and once that player got out there and they got outpriced, well, now they're competition for the guy who maybe was waiting just for deals to begin with, and all of a sudden there's got to be like another bidding war on like not nearly as premium of assets. So it's an interesting dilemma and dynamic, I think, when it comes just generally in auctions. In any auction, maybe we're a little unique because of the two copy approach. and you got to wait for it. But like any auction, there's always a cliff. And if you're holding the bag after that cliff, you just need to spend your money where you got to spend the money. It's just how auctions work. But overall, really competitive. I don't think any team walked away with a bunch of steals. I think there were some teams that did a really good job though, still with like finding value where they could, getting some assets that I prefer or it fit with their team build. So I'll kind of review kind of how I shared this about a week after our auction was about done. So a week of bidding, I shared this out. But I'll kind of go over this for people who are unfamiliar with this. For fun, we do some grading of recruiting classes. So based on who you get into your group, just like in normal college football, they kind of grade them off of the number of stars they have or a score and what those recruiting classes match up for those teams. And then for fun, we kind of rank them. We base the score of each player based on Superflex ADP, startup ADP, so it gives a good range of player evaluations, and they get a certain score based on how valuable they are in a startup. How classes are scored is you get full scores for your first 4 recruits, and then from 5 to 8 in your number of recruits kind of tapers off in terms of score value. So a player that's your 5th highest scoring recruit is only worth like 80% of their score of their recruit score, and then by the 8th it's like 20%. Anything after that doesn't count towards the score. It kind of helps normalize a little bit of the value of the players that you get. So like top end players are higher value, and getting more of those top end players usually provides a better score of your class. Instead of just like getting a bunch of garbage and you just got 10 recruits that were garbage and still match up to the same score. So there's a little bit of ebb and flow between that process. Something new I also offered this year was this thing I called a residual. Residual is just a difference based on the average price that that player went for throughout all the conferences for every copy. So, for example, there is our top player this year from a price perspective was. Let's see if I can get this to load. I think it was a Genti in
Yeah, it's Air
Pac-12.
Force had 208 on GNT.
So that was a $43 positive residual. So that means it was $43 higher than the average price for Genti, and that was just a barometer to kind of give people an idea of like average spent for a certain type of player. And then you kind of group all those different differences up, and you come out with a residual score. And really, what this is just trying to illustrate from a class perspective is like, hey, as a team or a school, we used our money and we found some value here as a overall class, or here's a group that maybe overspent and didn't get as much value, or maybe one of their assets was more expensive when you compare them to the rest of the field. None of these things are really like academia, statistically verifiable, like value things. This is just for fun as a ways to kind of quantify auctions, because auctions are incredibly gray. Values are incredibly gray, as we've kind of already illustrated now, but this is trying to put some of that into context so people can kind of fun and have comparisons for that. So getting into that, we will start in the ACC. I actually got to participate in the ACC. I took over for UCF this year because their coach was indisposed due to medical reasons. So I stepped in for the auction and bid for him. It was a interesting auction. I will start with the transfer portal because this is probably one of the 2 storylines from the transfer portal piece that actually bears weight into the general recruiting. They had a Brock Purdy that got put up. In an ACC, there's at that time 3 teams: Clemson, North Carolina, and Wake Forest, that were really without options at QB. So there was a huge bidding frenzy for that Brock Purdy that Duke put out for transfer. He went for a final price of $100. So Duke got some sizable pot of money back for a senior quarterback, and I think it kind of set the bar for what the QB market might be. And the QB market was kind of hot to begin with in the ACC. The first copy of Cam Ward went for $145 to Wake Forest. I think that actually the $145 was the entire pot that North Carolina still had, and North Carolina had, I think, the Cam Ward rebate. So he put all his money, his entire budget, because he won Brock Purdy. He put his entire remaining budget, on Cam Ward to get a backup QB this year, which is something I think we theorized and kind of as a group, like looking at individual conferences and thinking like what could happen here. I think we thought there's a real good chance that even with him getting Brock Purdy, just like he got Tua Tagovailoa last year to fill his clearly vacant QB position, there's still a really good chance you just throw all your money at Cam Ward for that second option, because he did get kind of screwed last year with some injuries with Tua, that he got lucky and kind of made it through unscathed, but during those couple weeks. But testing that gambit again clearly wasn't something he was willing to do, and it led to a huge bidding war for Cam Ward. The other really big expenditure that was Joey, they had a higher Travis Hunter market in the ACC this year than I think other conferences. Joey got a Travis Hunter copy at 130, which was $35 over the average Travis Hunter price. And then the other big thing was people were really waiting for the Jeanty and Omarion Hampton in this one. I think the second copy, so I think Duke was looking to get in on the Jeanty game, got outpriced. Was looking at the Omarion Hampton game. Him and Georgia Tech kind of got in a little bidding war, and we're waiting for like the last copy to happen. And then it led to just some absolute insanity in the second half of the auction, where Louisville was waiting for all of his money to be spent on certain assets, and just wasn't able to land because Duke and Georgia Tech still had money because they were waiting for that like second copy of Hampton. It was an incredibly fun auction. They were really active, a lot of great pricing going on here. I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of like what team might stand out to you. I think for me, Clemson was kind of interesting. They took a lot of value in this auction with Egbuka and Caleb Johnson, and their Jackson Dart price I thought was pretty good. They got Tyler Warren for a pretty good deal, and then I think the flyer on Tyler Show was a pretty good pivot with getting Dart and Show when he doesn't have any QBs, because he was the loser of the QB market. I think Clemson did a really good pivot for what was available to him and got a lot of depth and talent to place on a pretty good team. So as long as he can figure out the QB thing this year and get some starter, I think he'll be in a pretty good space. But I think he did overall find a ton of value in the positions that he did.
Yeah, we talked about it. I liked what Clemson did. They have the number one recruit class based on kind of the metrics you put together. Again, I think they'd like to walk away with a like sure thing at QB that they can use for this year. That obviously hurts, but we've seen it in the league before where teams either start without one or start with one and lose one along the way. So it's doable to kind of get through, and I think we talked about this. I think now the important part is kind of using the league strategy to your advantage to kind of navigate the waters, if you will. There might be a shot here where both of these guys redshirt and you don't have a quarterback the whole year, or maybe like by the end of the year, one of them's playing and you burn a red shirt, save the other one. I don't know. It's interesting. The North Carolina thing, like you said, that was kind of interesting. Way too much for Brock Purdy. I don't know what that was, especially like you kind of alluded to, that we kind of had an idea that he was going to go after Cam Ward. So if Cam Ward's in the picture, again, especially with kind of how the bye weeks unfolded, there's a chance you're going to potentially burn that red shirt just for the 1 week to keep a pretty strong season alive. And if that's the case, like if you're burning it,
you might not have needed Brock Purdy.
Yeah. yeah, it's just like one of those things. So again, it's in hindsight, um, kind of kind of work around that in the future so it doesn't happen. But
I think the biggest value is he still has a QB next year. He's not in the same
right,
like cycle.
right.
So
And I think too, and that's the thing too, is like as much as it's like, oh, I don't have the fourth, like, who cares? Like, your team is good, you go for it now, you go for it next year. Like,
mhm.
a lot of these teams, like whoever had Brock Purdy, they envisioned having him for 4 years. Like, they aren't using 4 years, you transfer him. So like that could be an option too. Is like if you know play Cam Ward for a couple of years and transfer him, cash out on him, whatever it is. So I mean, there's more to it than just straight up, hey, I've got to have 4 years, technically five with a red shirt. I think playing that way is kind of a little goofy, but yeah, definitely something that stuck out. I liked what Duke did. I think we might have talked about this, and I can't remember if it was you or not, but I think somebody made the comment that nobody got two of the top,
That
whatever
was
running backs.
my prediction. But I think what allowed this to happen was he was the one who transferred Purdy. So Purdy doesn't
Yeah,
go that high. I don't think he gets both Judkins and Hampton. But
right. And so, like,
yeah,
I think at least through my digging through, like, this is the only
the only
time that this has
team.
happened.
Yep, that's the only
Yeah,
team.
there might be one. There might be one other instance. I was going through them and I can't remember because I did this,
I don't see
a
a
couple weeks
single
ago.
another team that was able to
Um,
get
but
to
I know there were some
grab.
teams that stacked up, two 5-star guys or multi. I think they were both wide receivers or a wide receiver
Hmm.
running back top duo. But like this is the only instance of like there's two top dogs on here. Um, I think it's good. I think it'll be interesting. I would imagine he's not going to redshirt these guys. I would imagine he's playing them. Just based with what he's got at wide receiver.
And I think he's got
Um,
Stroud, right? And doesn't he have another?
he's got Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Um, uh, some other. He's got Brian Robinson, Hank Bigsby. So there's some, definitely some need there. But then like wide receivers, you got Neighbors, Puka, Chris Olave. Uh, I think it was like a really kind of good. Yes, Brock Purdy would have helped him this year, but I think he's probably better served with Judkins and Hampton. So I think that was a really good move by Duke.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of
I
who else
mean,
I had
you
kind of.
can't predict that he would have gotten $50 out of Purdy this for 1 year to be able to land that.
Right,
But the fact that he did, he made quite a
right.
bit of
Took
out of
advantage.
it. Yeah.
And then I think the other team just real quick. I mean, there are
I
a
think
bunch of teams,
Syracuse
but
did
like,
pretty good. They got a
yeah,
Henderson and a Harvey, and they went pretty
yeah.
hard on the running backs, but also got a lot of value out of them.
I liked Boston College as well. To just kind of get some of the, I honestly, it was the guys that were similar to what was on my list. Um, he grabbed a Jaden Higgins, uh, Trey Harris, Matthew Golden, Alec Iomanor out of Tennessee. Um, then he kind of got that second tier running back market that we talked about. So
Hmm.
didn't pay premium prices for any of the top guys, but then kind of took that entire next tier: the Tootin, Scatabo, Sampson, DJ Giddens. Um, I just thought it was a good showing for Connor, who's a first year
Hmm.
um, owner, and I think that was kind of, if anywhere we had some problems, trying to get things set up, on the commish side of things for this auction, that's where our problems, kind of arose. And I thought Boston College was one of the newcomers that just did a pretty solid job, to be honest.
Yeah, I think for in terms of teams that I didn't really love Wes's auction for Georgia Tech out of the ACC. He was a team that waited for Hampton, and I think everything that followed after it just felt like it was, I don't know, could have been better served elsewhere. Like he got a lot of people love Royals, but he spent like $33 on him. Spent $19 on Woody Marks. Like I don't know, a bunch of other things. It just felt like he waited too long, and lost so much more value because he was trying to wait for that second Omarion, or just fighting for Omarion Hampton. So fixated on, I think he had a rebate for him,
Yeah.
and I think that sucks up so much time and potential value in other positions. I didn't really love the way he operated with that piece.
Yeah, I think I mean, this is kind of what was hinting at when we talked at the very beginning of this thing. The guys that I was listing off were the Richard Smiths, Kyle Monangai. You threw Woody Marks in there. Taj Brooks is in that category. Um, that just kind of seems to be what he's got here. Again, maybe not on purpose, just kind of leftovers. So I don't hate it because these are guys that had some hype to them. But you're right. I mean, the class is only really
One
headlined by
guy.
Hampton and like Royals, and if that's what you were gonna do, I don't know what West started with money wise, but West probably could have just dropped $170 on Gianti and then spent the rest on
Almost the same
uh,
guys.
well, right, like the Royals and whatever, and I said that would have looked better.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna hate it. Like
I
it's
mean, from
hard to
a
without knowing where they go. But in terms of
yeah,
like what the other, you know, hauls are gonna look like, yeah, I mean, I tend to agree, especially with what his roster is. Like I feel that, like I said, I feel like he probably thinks that he's competing, and if Hampton doesn't like above and beyond pull out of that Chargers job with like a massive workload, it's gonna look problematic here. The other thing I would say is kind of like it's just weird to me to see teams like this and like you're rostering Israel Benicana,
mhm.
um, some of these guys that just I'm trying to think of who else is on this roster. Like you're better off like Theo Johnson. I don't know. Theo Johnson I guess was okay, but they're just like the Dylan Law. I don't know how to say that. LAUB Loeb Lob, whatever the fuck his name is. Um, just guys like toss back to the pool and take more darts because I don't know what's available in ACC, but when you have like that type of auction, you need as many dart throws as possible just to be like, oh, hey, look at this. Like, if it does work out, like I hit, I think there's a lot of the same guys on waivers across the league, like the Jonte Thorntons, the Arian Smiths, Jimmy Horns. Trying to think of who else. Just guys like Xavier Restrepo's, like just these long shot guys. Like throw them on there, and for better chance of them working out than the guys that you already kind of have an idea what their roles are. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting option
Yeah.
for him.
The other one, I hate doing this to him, but and Joey fessed up that he did some drunk bidding, but I don't really love his auction either. I think he way overpaid for Travis Hunter. He might have gotten stuck because I would imagine Florida State was the other bidding team on him, and Florida State had the rebate. But $130 for Travis Hunter felt like a lot, and then he spent $20 on Shador. He was actively pleading in the chat. I think at one time he tried to solicit Wes to say, "Hey Wes, you want a $21 Shador Sanders?" And Wes was like, "No, thank you." But it was just he just overspent in a few places, got sucked with some money on like Shadur that was too expensive, and I think he gave himself a grade. I think it was like a C minus, and I think that's an apt description because I think the more I look at the class, the more I'm like, he made some missteps, even though he scores like the sixth best class. I don't think that that's an equivalence to what he did. I think Shadur is getting a bump for being in a super flex thing where his value as a recruit is not nearly as high. Same with Dylan Gabriel. Um, but yeah, I don't love it. I think he could have done way better. I think he should not bid while drunk next time. But That's the ACC. We will move on to the Big Ten at this point. The Big Ten was interesting. In I don't know if you want to. You can't see this, Lewis, but like when you're comparing this like graph of like residuals, the ACC is really kind of spread out. The like max is like $36 in terms of $43 in terms of residuals, all the way to 34. $34. So there's like a spread of $70 in there. The Big Ten was much more tight knit in terms of what it was going to spend. I think it was $27 to 14, which is almost like a spread of less than 30.
15. Yeah, I
So
can see it.
so like everything was really tight. I think everyone really bid really well. The markets were pretty defined. Um, I don't think anyone spent badly in the Big 12, and I gave them all kudos at the end. I thought it was just like really
Big
well
Ten.
done. Like every year, the Big Ten just kind of is very regimented. Players go for this. No one really spends too much. It's like by the book. Um, there is a few players that get values, but I think it all evens out at the end. I think the one exception I'll put is I don't love what Maryland did. Maryland had a Genty rebate. The price he paid for Genty was higher than I would pay for Genty. He had the rebate of $20, spent like 190 something. Him and Minnesota were really looking for Genty, and I don't. He kind of just walked away with just Genty. He had the lowest, I think, budget in the entire Big Ten. Put it on the most expensive copy of a player. And I don't love that recipe for getting yourself off the doormat as a team. There's definitely value in like you got a really good player, he's going to make your team better regardless, but I'm like I don't think it puts you on the right like trajectory to lift your team in the right path. But outside of that, I thought everything else was pretty copacetic. I think there was a lot of um, good prices. We had some pretty more expensive like Caleb Johnson copy players, but yeah, I'm not sure really what else to say. I felt like everyone did a really good job. Trying to think if there was any notable stories from the auction. Can't really think of any. We're pretty boring in the Big Ten. It seems like. I think that in terms of best value, one of the best deals I thought was Andy, who got our top class. He got a like a $27 Jackson Dart, which I thought was a really good value for a player that could be a starting quarterback. Like that just seems like really good upside. And the fact that he also got Tootin and Tesla. I think Tesla, the second copy was like almost 10 times more than that copy that he got. And I think he just did a good job spending his money. But I really like the Jackson Dart that he got for $27. I thought that was a good value. Because I think our first copy went for like 40 something dollars. So
How did you feel that Daniel did for stepping into your juggernaut of a Wisconsin Badgers roster from last year?
I thought he did pretty good, to be honest. I think he got a lot of value. He got like a $78 Travis Hunter. There was a second copy of Hunter that I forgot was even on the going to be on the board. I wasn't going to be able in on the market for that Hunter by the time that money came around, but I think other people forgot there was a second copy of Hunter, and he got him because he was just kind of flitting money where he could, um, and he got Hunter, he got Ibuka, and Jalen Noel. Noel was good. He I don't think
Yeah,
he spent everything, which is probably the downside to his auction overall. But he got sometimes you only can spend what people can price you to too. Is like he still got players. Like it's not like he didn't
right.
walk away with nothing. So um, Hunter and Egbuka could fit. I don't think he'll play. He can redshirt them for next year, and they'll be good pieces for the ultimate demise of that Wisconsin team as it moves into the sunset of its contention. But he also kind of took a few flyers. Like shit, you don't know. Maybe Gabriel or Shador have won the starting job in Cleveland, and now next year he'll have two redshirt freshman QBs or a freshman starting QB that he can now use to like start his rebuild, or maybe give his team one more run into contention. But I think he did a good job personally.
Yeah. And then I have no idea who Michigan State is. They talk to me in the chat like they know, like I know who they are, and I don't. But I think they had an interesting. They're another one like didn't get. I have such a hard time throwing Harvey in that top running back group, but another team that ended up with like two of the top guys like in that running back mix. So I think that um,
And
they
that
also have a shot, to kind of pull out. I mean, they got nothing else. I mean, that's the only kind of downside here. The tight end dart throws are interesting. Um, I think this is probably the first year for me where I saw value in that tight end class, and I even dipped my toes in it. I typically don't. So I think that he just kind of took, a stab, a relatively cheap stab at that kind of tier, um, in hopes that one of those guys pans out. And if one of them pans out, you walk away with, hopefully three guys from this class. But um, I just thought it was kind of like again, interesting when you can pair, especially when the market trends are definitely running back heavy, when you can grab two of probably the more sought after like pieces in the league that people were fighting over, and he was able to get two of them.
Yeah, I think the thing I struggle with is timeline, and Michigan State's kind of a weird team. They threw everything out last year, so they threw Brees Hall, Devonta Smith, um, and Najee Harris. I think they threw out last year for transfers. I gobbled all of them up as Wisconsin. He ended up getting Caleb Williams, starting Caleb Williams the entire season. Definitely helped his team. I think he got like maybe 5-6 wins. Um, but I think it just kind of started the timeline maybe a little prematurely, and then he's adding two running backs that I don't think you're gonna redshirt because again, Caleb Williams' timeline is already ticking. So you're gonna play these two running backs. I don't think he's got. I think he's got jack shit for wide receiver, tight ends to fill that. So it's like
Lad McConkey, that's kind of
that's
it.
it. So he's got four players, and two of them are rookies that he doesn't know if they're going to be like good things. Is a bit. It's the team could look much better next year, but I'm feeling like for this year, it's going to look it could potentially look a little weird because he's going to be starting four, and it's just those four. Like those are the four players, and he's going to be keep adding to. He's going to need to keep adding like startable players to make them good. And by the time they might be actually good, Caleb Williams might be like walking out the door.
Right. Well, and it's a
So
weird thing too. Like if you're saying that he tossed out all those players, like he also has Chuba Hubbard, so he'll have five.
okay,
But it's just weird that you wouldn't have tossed Chuba Hubbard out last year, or this year you wouldn't have just been like, oh, if I burned it all down last year, like here's a piece that I didn't think was gonna be valuable that now is. Let's toss that out there and see if somebody fights over it. Um, it honestly, the timeline, you're right, doesn't match up. And just kind of going back to Maryland real quick, where you were like, oh, I don't like this for them. I feel like at least Maryland's pieces are all, with the exception, I think they had
he
one
redshirted
piece, but like
those guys
their
last
pieces
year.
are all right. And so like there's a better kind of like timeline at Maryland for that kind of all in burn the red shirt, or not burn the red shirt. So we're, at least have the option to burn the red shirt if you want it, whatever. But the timeline makes a little more sense in Maryland than it does here.
Well,
But
I expect
kind of
Maryland to like.
interesting.
I think Maryland's going to redshirt Genty and Warren. Like I don't think that they're going to start them because he's got Bryce Young and whatever is like what a
Right,
sophomore.
right.
So like even if he waits, Genty not playing this year is not the end of the world. Where I think like Caleb Williams is such a premium asset that you don't sit them. Bryce Young, take him or leave
Well,
him.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like Maryland going all in on win-ish now players still has like the flexibility to kind of follow their timeline. Because I think the only where the hell is it? James Cook is like the kind of the timeline there. He's got a junior year on that, so he'll have this year and next year of James Cook. Um, and so I think everything still fits for like next year being the window for Maryland, whereas like Michigan State, and if Maryland doesn't want the window to be next year and they want it to be this year, they can. They have that flexibility. I just don't think Michigan State's going to have that flexibility. So it was just kind of a
Well, the weird thing
weird that
for
you kind of put that together.
yeah, I think the weird thing for Maryland was they decided to keep like James Cook as an early grad. That's a weird one for
Yeah.
me. But he at least has a few more pieces like Brian Thomas, Zay Flowers, James Cook. Bryce Young is not like this ultimate great value. Ray Davis is a good backup. There's a little more meat on the bone of this team than there is, I think, for Michigan State. If I were to take a guess, like it's Calvin Calvin Austin, Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, who might be the third wide receiver this year, and Dontavian Weeks, which might not even play. So like, there's just a lot less there, and to throw it all at those two assets. Both of them are a little sketchy approach. Like I don't think I would have done that for either of those teams, gone in this type of direction. Like I might have even no, no. I would have liked to see maybe Michigan State's approach with Harvey and Travion Henderson, what Maryland does. Like that would have been a better approach to me for Maryland because he would have gotten two more assets that he could play along James Cook instead of just one player. That'd be a little bit
Right.
better to fit your starting lineup than that. And I might have just maybe changed up the approach overall as Michigan State, but we'll see. Sometimes this stuff just works out wildly different. Last year, I didn't think LSU really had much of a chance at being good, and the players went off on his team, and he got really good health throughout the season outside of Trevor Lawrence near the end. But yeah, sometimes this stuff just works out, so you never know. So if you're really confident in that approach, take it. It's just where I sit from, it's not exactly what I would be looking to do. A few other notable teams. Rutgers kind of went with a lot of good depth pieces. Little leery on some of that. That Jackson Dart price was a little high. I think it was probably one of the higher ones in the market. And same with Colston Loveland, but I really like those two pieces regardless, just because they potentially provide so much value. Got some other decent depth pieces. Jordan James was a little expensive, but I think that was near the end of the auction. Michigan had a
Yeah,
lot of.
I
Yeah,
kind of like what. Oops, sorry, I like what Matt did. Matt like, and I think that it's one of those like I don't know if he went into the with a plan of ending up with two quarterbacks there, and I don't have it in front of me the price point for Milrow, but um,
he got him for
I just kind of
19, which was the average for
yeah
Milrow.
yeah. So it's not bad. Um, the one thing that I can say is then those types of moves, if they work, will
Great.
like pay dividends down the road. So I think that that's kind of one thing. We saw it in the Big 12 with Kansas last year. They walked away. I think with like Penix Jr., Caleb Williams, and Drake May or something like that, where when that happens at some point, I mean, you'd be stupid to not cash in on that. But like, it's just one of those things where I think that it's just even if you don't need a quarterback, like he doesn't need one. He has Stroud. He redshirted him, so he's got 3 more years of Stroud potentially. It's just like I think more teams need to kind of maybe pay attention to that. Not necessarily the top end quarterback market, but like those guys that are either going to take a redshirt year for the first thing and then come and start next year for their team. Um, just kind of play like long ball. I'd rather take those shots than I think the ones that you and I talk about, like where you're at in like I don't even know who you added, Quinn Ewers and that Cam Miller or whoever else, and it's just like,
Curtis Rourke, you mean?
yeah, that's who you added. Like, get that shit out of here. Like, take the stabs at like the darts and the mill runs. Like, those tend to pay off more so than it is you trying to hit on a Brock Purdy.
True. I will say a $0 Curtis Rourke doesn't hurt anything. He can be cut tomorrow, and I didn't lose any money. I do really agree with the sentiment though that like modestly priced backup Shador Sanders, Jalen Milrose, even Tyler Shows, I think had a lot of value in this auction.
Yeah, I think that's one that I may have just had my own kind of like, I am not fucking touching that guy, and I probably shouldn't have had that mindset just because of the value across the auction. I think it's one of those, like, if there was a redo, not saying that I necessarily target him, but I probably would have, like, I literally, when he was on the board, I was like, I am not touching that. I'm not bidding on it. I don't want to get stuck with it. But like, there was a lot of like, and again, I don't think Carr did Carr retire at that point,
He had retired right
or was he in
before
the right when it
the
happened? Okay.
upperclassmen. Yeah,
Okay.
transfer
So
portal.
it was
Because
just one of those where I don't know what it was. Maybe I thought that his market would go higher because of the retirement, or what it was, but like, he's one of those, teams are getting him for like $14. If he wins the job and has the thing, like, those are the type of like ads that, because again, the teams that probably grabbed him were teams that also added like at wide receiver and running back. Whereas like, we'll see the teams that like added wards and maybe the more expensive darts didn't have, as much money to play with.
yeah, so like I'll use Navy for an example. They got a $15 Tyler Show. I think that's a great dart throw. Like he doesn't have a starting job today, just like Jackson Dart doesn't necessarily have a starting job today for Illinois' copy. But I feel like there's a really good chance they get a shot, and that shot could be 200 points for a year or 180 points for a year, and that's still valuable in this format. Um, and for $15, it's like that could be just a backup running back in some cases, and I'd rather have the quarterback in that space. Definitely. I wish I could have landed Milrow. I wasn't going to spend more than $20. I felt like anything more than that for a player, a third round player with Sam Darnold already there. Like it just felt like a bigger risk, and the dollar amount was getting too high. And then like just to clarify, because we said this before, where like the backup QB market was a little wonky. There's a definite price inflection point where you were spending too much on this player and it's not worth that value anymore, or that the risk is too great where that value is not there anymore. And there's definitely copies of that. But I think anything under $20 for a Show, a Milrow, Shadur's maybe a different example, but like Show and Milrow, anything under $20 feels like a good value for me. So yeah, I think Big Ten again. There's not a single team here that I thought didn't do good. We highlighted some examples of some teams that it might not orient to maybe what they should do, but I still think that they did a pretty good job getting value out of the auction. They didn't overpay or overspend. They just might not align with what they want to do, and that's okay. Let's move to the Big 12 then, Lou. How did you think it went
Yeah.
over there?
Typical Big 12. Army didn't show up until like day 3, or I think it was day 3. I don't think it was day 2. Um, he was actively there, but just not bidding. And we talked about it, a little bit earlier about kind of the strategy of these. I really wish um, some of these guys would maybe pay attention to the auction norms. Like, again, if you want to be patient and that's your strategy, power to you. But um, hold on, sorry. Just getting a text message. But when the market doesn't dictate for that to be the strategy, like, it can't be the strategy. Like, I think before the auction, I was sharing Big 12 auction data with you, and I was like, the second copies are always more expensive in the Big 12 except for the quarterback market. Like that's like it's wild. Like based off of last year, I think the year before, I was sharing the data. Or yeah, I think that was how it went for the most part. I think it's quarterbacks. And it's like these teams, like Army's one of them. I think who's the other one? TCU and SMU are the other two that like to wait until the end. And it's just like, unless you're looking for a quarterback, it doesn't make sense in the Big 12 to wait. And those guys wait every single year, and their rosters kind of like show. And the kind of the example of that would be like pulling up Army. Army got Jackson Dart and Shadur Sanders. And it's just like, that tends to be what's there in the conference. And if you want it, have it. If not, no big deal. And I think he got a Bryce Young a few years back, same deal. He got Michael Penix last year, same deal. It's like, yes, like I just said, there's value in adding all these quarterbacks, but at some point, like Army needs something other than quarterback. And if quarterback's the only thing you're going to get at the day 2, day 3, day 4 of the auction in the Big 12, like you got to show up earlier. I think the only other piece that Army got of any kind of value is like Cam Scatabo, and I want to say it was the stupid expensive one.
It was
And
right
then
at
he
average.
did get it. He did. Oh, was it?
Yeah.
So maybe he got the average one, and somebody else in the division got the stupid expensive one. But then he got Emeka Egbuka too, so like that was his kind of class.
But his Egbuka was
Again, it's just
more expensive, like to your
right
point.
because what happens is then he sits there, and the team like TCU's late to the party every year, SMU's late to the party every year, and so like they sit there and fight over
That last
the
asset.
same
Yeah.
guys. But then what also is happening is kind of you've hit on it. Previously when you're talking about like when guys miss out, like when you're in on GNT and then you miss out, there's a trickle down effect to where then it becomes you hit that point in the auction where it's like, okay, I have $108 left. Like at this point, I've got to freaking spend it. I don't care where it goes. I don't care necessarily as much about auction value as I would as just like
Hmm.
getting players.
Hmm.
And so then like that's Army, TCU, and SMU are fighting with guys like Oklahoma State who were active, had spent some money, and now he only has $67 left. And so guess what? Oklahoma State does everything that's worthwhile is going to $67,
Yep.
and then you guys bump it to 67, and then you fight over it, and it goes over the price point. And so it's just like one of those things where just like the Big 12 is filled with that kind of nonsense. um but
Man,
it's okay, same deal. So like TCU, same strategy here again with the quarterbacks late to the party: Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe. And I'm willing to bet SMU probably has a quarterback too. And it's just like, and I didn't look at this. It's just kind
go
of like talking.
quarterback.
Oh, he didn't. Thank God SMU, because you always made me look way too smart. Um, but again, I think SMU got. I don't know. Was this expensive? Was this Travis Hunter expensive?
It
Um,
was right under average, but it was probably gonna guess the second copy, right?
yeah,
Of
Taylor
Hunter,
went hard and fast. Um,
as he usually does. And
yeah, so
I
for
don't
for
hate
Travis
SMU's
Hunter.
class in terms of value or the players that he got. It just that's it. It's just 4 players. That's all it was. So like
Right.
I
And
don't
I
I don't
feel like
hate it. It's
again,
just yeah.
part of that is like, okay, you're late to the party, you win a player. So like you won Travis Hunter that took 90 or $100 off the thing. And then it's like, okay, what's left? And so what was left is SMU thought it was like fun to like fuck with me. Like that's like him and I were fighting over Kyle Williams and Jack Besh, and I think there was another player involved.
Tootin.
And so no, I wasn't. I wasn't in on Tootin. It was one of the guys that I ended up winning. Shoot, I don't remember, but I ended up pricing those high enough to where I was like, okay, like I won't have to deal with him anymore if I just let him have those players. And I think that that's kind of one of those auction things that you have to be at some point. You have to just be okay with letting somebody else win some players. And I think that a lot of owners struggle with that. That was the one thing where I was like, hey, let him win that, and then I can take like I don't know who it was. I think at that point I pivoted to running backs, and so I was trying to get like the Jordan James and the Woody Marks and those players, DJ Giddens off of the board without um, having anybody jack up the price. And so part of that was like, okay, get stuck with those guys, and I'm going to sneak, my guys off the board. Um, but in doing that, again, you're paying like maybe not premium prices as far as what the league is dictating. Like you're paying the premium price for what's on the board in your conference when you kind of do that and people are cash strapped, because that's exactly kind of all those players, the Jack Besh, the Tootin, Kyle Williams, all were probably around 35, $40 because I think that's about what I had left at the time. And I was just like, okay, let's get him out of the auction. And like that's what happened.
Yeah.
Tulsa was one that spent kind of erratically in the upperclassmen auction. Didn't for no reason, to be honest. Like they were getting like a bunch of no name players. Added Joe Milton. I'm trying to think of who else. Tank Bigsby, Jaleel McLaughlin, Emmanuel Wilson.
Did you name the team yet that did this?
Tulsa. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Jalen Naylor. I did say it. You just missed it. I talked too fast.
Okay.
Jalen Naylor, Tucker Kraft. These were all upperclassmen ads, and like they weren't like $1 ads either. They were like $5, $7 here, $10 there. I think Tank Bigsby was $25. So I want to say like Tulsa had spent $100 on garbage for the most part. Before the rookie auction even started, and then I hinted at it earlier, dropped a 20 piece on Dylan Gabriel, so he had his $20. So again, right off the rip, he's got $120 tied up. Day one, which really kind of made him not a player on anything, and it shows.
And in that respect, like if I was Tulsa. And I think more teams are picking up on this because I definitely feel like there's this tug and pull when it comes to rebates that's growing in terms of like I have a middling player. Like premium players are always going to go well above $20, and you're baking in that price, that rebate in that final price whenever you're bidding on those top guys. But it's the players that are underneath that are like near the $20 mark where it becomes a real big game of chess. And I'm curious why more teams haven't really deployed this like poison pill approach. Like a Dylan Gabriel. You figured out pretty early that he's got $20 on it. I'm just going to push it up to 20 and just tie up $20. If I'm Tulsa, why play that game? Why not put it in some random weird number, or even just leave it at zero, or just like $2 or $3, and anything over that, let it go, because you'll have, while $20 being tied up later in the auction is a challenge, it's still more detrimental if someone else walks away with a Dylan Gabriel for $20 that they don't get the rebate on. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that just seems like to be a more practical play if you have a rebate on a guy. And who cares if I get Dylan Gabriel or not, if everyone's going to have to pay $20 for him. Like, I would almost set it at $19, $17. Give someone the gambit of like, oh, he's got it at $20, and they go push it over. All right, you just paid for an $18 Dylan Gabriel. I'll come back to the next copy. Or I don't get Dylan Gabriel, but I didn't tie up $18 on him. To me, that's becoming a more interesting dynamic that I think more people should be deploying.
Right. Like I think I did it year one at Baylor. Was it at Baylor? No. Year one. No, it was year one at Western Michigan where I took Jalen Weidermeyer. And obviously terrible pick, one of the worst picks I've ever made in my entire fantasy career.
The only one, right?
But then, I can't, whatever you want to call that, threw him out there, and somebody in minor spent like $17 on him, and I was just like, that's freaking fantastic. Again, I think there's definitely some validity to getting your rebate players, but like. You also don't need it. Like Tulsa doesn't need it. Like they had just added Joe. They spent money to add Joe Milton. They have Purdy. They have JJ McCarthy. Like it's just like, what are we doing? And again, there's value in the quarterbacks, but it's just
It's
with
almost
how
like,
kind of his auction
yeah,
went. It was just like he was another one that was out on 4 players, and it was just wild to see the kind of this all. I mean, again, his four were probably a little bit better than SMU's. That he's got Egbuka, Loveland, Warren. I kind of like those. So he was kind of the big push against me because I had the rebate on Loveland. I let him take the first copy. I think if I remember how things
just over
went.
$20.
Um, I let him do it because I just like maybe he was the only one fighting me with him. I was like, if he gets him off here, maybe I can get a cheaper um, Loveland. My copy ended up going a couple bucks more, I think 25, because somebody came in and bid me up the last second. Same thing with Tyler Warren. I was in on Tyler Warren fighting him, and I was like, all right, I'm going to let him go. The Tyler Warren thing almost worked out for me where I had um, I think he was coming off the board. I can't remember what it was, 3 minutes or something like that. I had him coming off the board for $17. And somebody like, I can't remember who it was. I was bitching about somebody, SMU or TCU, one of them. I don't think it was TCU. I think it was SMU. Came in and reset him with 3 minutes left, and then TCU took him from SMU, and then again that's what happens. We kind of talk about this. You fight over what's left on the board. Those guys show up to the party, and then they started fighting. That second copy of Warren went for $42 to TCU. Like, you want a prize, come on down. If you were paying attention sooner, you probably would have gotten it for $25.
Hmm.
But those were kind of the weird ones: the Tulsas, SMU's, TCU's. Who else? Army. Um, I think Iowa State got kind of very similar situation to where like I got gifted a Bijan Robinson 2 years ago. He got gifted a
Second,
Gianti
yeah.
copy. Um,
Which,
that was the second copy, and I was a player on it, but I really wanted to stick to my plan for this year because again, when I got Bijan, that wasn't the plan, and I was like, he's gonna fall in my lap. It makes like it's a cheapish copy. Same thing with this Gianti copy, but I didn't want my cards to go that way again. So what I did was maxed out Iowa State's budget on Gianti, basically making it clear as day that Iowa State at that point couldn't bid on anything else, couldn't do anything else. So like he was locked out of the auction as well. Um, and it really opened the door for one of those teams that was like I thought Army would wake up and like come to the party and be like, oh,
I can just grab him. Yeah.
all you had to do is bid $1 more, and nobody else was going to be able to bid on Gianti, and it would have been Army that walked away with the heck of a deal on Gianti, and he didn't do that for whatever freaking reason. And Iowa State, walked away with pretty cheap Gianti. So I think that kind of made his draft. He also got a Matthew Golden, the Isaac Tisla, and a Savion Williams, kind of the pieces that I like there for Iowa State. Um, I'm trying to think. Kansas, I didn't like as much as I think Kansas played the auction game much, much better last year, but they also had a
A
shit
lot
ton
of
of
money.
money,
Yeah.
which kind of allowed him to just kind of pick apart the auction, take what he wanted. He didn't, what he needed, and then he got a ton of auction value in the second half uh, with the second copies last year at the quarterback position. Because, like I said, Big 12 second option quarterbacks just to fall off a pricing cliff, and he was able to get the second copies of May, Penix, and Williams. I think they were all second copies, super cheap. But like this go around, I just didn't like what he did. He spent a good bit of money on guys that just, I don't know, weren't guys. I mean, he got Ted McMillan, Travian Henderson. That's kind of it. I was expecting more because he also was one that had a little bit of just extra money because he threw out some more pieces again this year into the upperclassmen auction. So I was expecting like a better haul, and I kind of didn't get it. He seemed to be like what he wanted this year. He paid like premium price for, whereas last year he got a lot of deals. So kind of a flip flop for Kansas. I don't know. who else? I think Texas was doing really, really, really well until they kind of rage quit the entire league, I think. Um,
Yeah, I guess we could talk about that. Uh,
um,
I will say the big gripe here was I don't even remember the player, but there was a gripe on
it was Scatabo.
Scatabo. Okay, well, God, what a choice. What a choice to get angry about. But got upset that someone bid on their player that was in the red with like I don't know 40 to 20 minutes. And just as a disclaimer for everyone, if there's time left on the clock, players can be bid on. There's no like soft lock, no gentleman's agreement. You're in this for the final minute. People will get bid up. Player proxies right. Um, it's what happens in auctions. I feel bad that someone gets so upset about it. And could there be some gentlemanly like sportsmanship around this? Sure, but that's not a guarantee. I would never expect that, nor would I hold anyone to that requirement. So it happens. It's part of the part of an auction. You have 12 hours to have the player for. If you don't have that full 12 hours, then I don't really know what to expect from what you expect from those pieces. But I knew from Texas perspective, like he was going to go in Ngenti anyway, and I think I said it before the auction or in my write up or in the write up that Texas is just it's a done deal. He's going to go get him, good or bad. Like that's the player he's going to get. And I don't think it like fits that team even remarkably close. I think they got like three decent
Yeah,
players
well,
out of the
well,
entire
right,
bunch.
and I think that John's one of those like, and I've talked about it in the past where some of these guys I've figured out, like
Mm-hmm.
Tulsa, I've figured out. John's another one that I've got figured out. Um, John has his guys that he likes, and he locks in on them, and most of the time he doesn't pivot, and you'll see a reflection of that in the price point that he pays for his players. This was the first year where I kind of thought, like, yes, he still was locked in on guys because he was obviously like blowing a gasket on Cam Scatabo because that was probably on his list of players. Um, but I thought he did a good job, at least for the most part, with the price point, like up until that point. So, like, I can't remember what day that was, maybe day three, early day three.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had Gianti off the board, Trey Harris, Terrence Ferguson pretty cheap, Mason Taylor pretty cheap. Um, he was going to get a Scatabo for, I don't know, maybe $30, something like that. Um, and then like somebody swooped in and reset it. He like lost his shit. He was pissed. He basically withdrew himself from the league for next year. I don't know if that's going to necessarily happen. Like I said that kind of a follow up because I think it was one of his better
Yeah,
auctions.
he
And like I said, like I think he did relatively well for what he normally does, if that makes sense. But I also think like that was also a turning point for him, like where if he had just stayed focused and kept going, like next man up, like he would have been better. I think kind of what happened then was like he didn't have a pivot off of Scatabo. What he did pivot to was I think Woody Marks and Taylor took the other guy. So let me look. Um, which I felt bad. Which I felt bad. He pivoted, and instead of, and this is something I think, at least in the Big 12 and maybe across the league, people need to pay a little bit more attention to. Um, he pivoted to Woody Marks and shoot, who the hell did Taylor take from him? Maybe it was
Giddings.
Jalen Milrow. I don't know. It might have been Milrow. Um, I want to say it was Milrow. Um, that he only had like $38 or whatever it was. He had it all on Scatabo.
Mm.
And instead of just doubling down and throwing that 30 again, at that point, like I said, it was day three, I want to say. So it was relatively late. Like, if you're going Milrow or you're going Woody Marks, this is where you kind of throw out the price a little bit. But if you split the difference at $16, like, there's a good chance at that point in the draft, like that's probably auction. Right? Like that's where you were like, hey, anything under $20 for Milrow is good. Woody Marks, again, I don't know what the average pricing was for him, but around that $16 is like
It's like
iffy. You might get him,
$15.
you might not. Right, you might get him, you might not. And so that was the approach that Texas did. And then, when those players come around, like I said, I took that. I took the Woody Marks copy, and Taylor took the Milroe copy, and then Texas lost out on another again because he lost out on the 12 hours worth of Scatabo, and then kind of was like, okay, I'm just going to split assets on guys that have that kind of it's just one of those things where like it should have been like throw your money at the one player you really like, get that player, and then figure out the rest. He kind
Yeah,
of was trying to make the best of it if you can, and like there's a lot of that goes on in the league. I saw a lot of it in minor too, where teams just kind of are like, oh yeah, I can split my like you can't at that point. Like you have to go all in on something and get lucky because you're just gonna get lucky otherwise, and it's just like one of those where people will sit you on the clock, and Texas unfortunately sat for 12 hours on the Cam Scatabo thing, couldn't bid on anything else, got reset, and then bid on two other guys, split his assets up, and then Taylor and I took both of those guys from him. And so it's like, okay, again, I don't think we didn't let him run down. I certainly didn't. I don't think Taylor did either. Um, just because um, we didn't wait till it got red, but same kind of thing where it's a prolonged, you don't have any money. But I think that was for the most part all the good action of the Big 12. I don't know if there's anybody else that you.
I liked Taylor's class. I think some of the more questionable things was like you guys had a pretty expensive Cam Ward copies
Yeah,
overall.
I think that was Marshall. Marshall was the one that, yeah, I forgot to
I
talk about
think he
Marshall.
needs a
Marshall was the one
QB
team
though,
that
right?
needed well, and he walked away with Tyler Shaw
Show, yeah.
copy. I think yes, Shaw. Yeah, Tyler Shaw copy. He has him. Yep. So I think again for what Marshall needed, he needed quarterbacks. Walked away with two. Like I don't think you can put any guy to Caleb Johnson. So
That's
I think
pretty good.
Marshall with kind of the money that he had, did fairly well. But again, it was also one of those like some of these teams that are like stockpiling quarterbacks. Like I don't. Again, maybe it's too soon, but I don't know why Kansas wouldn't have thrown out one of the three that he got last year. Just pick one that you don't like, and you probably would have gotten a good bit of money from like the Marshalls of the world fighting over a quarterback. And I think there's somebody else. I think Taylor's the other team that needed a quarterback,
Yeah, Taylor.
and
I
I
don't.
don't think Taylor got a quarterback. Oh, he got
No,
Milroe,
he got
but
Milroe and Will Howard, but like Taylor's going to be in a predicament next year where he's going to likely need a quarterback. Anything could happen for that team, and
well,
he's
this
not
is two
panicking
years
for
in a
this
row
year.
now.
Yeah,
It's 2 years in a row now because Justin Fields' situation. He didn't have.
it wasn't starting
He
last
only
year.
had
Wasn't
Fields.
prepared. Yeah,
Right. He wasn't starting when we did this. Fields hadn't been moved yet. I think he hadn't been moved to Pittsburgh. Um, Taylor went through the whole auction last year, needing a quarterback, couldn't land one, and then I thought for sure he'd get a quarterback this year. He just didn't. Like he got like Taylor's one that focuses on his Debbie rebates, and he had the rebate on Hunter and on
and Johnson,
Caleb
yeah.
Johnson.
Which he got
Because
great.
there was one point where
He
like
got great prices for. I'll say those are both really decent
right.
prices for those guys. But
Um,
yeah,
but he needs a quarterback, and so it's just like one of those where now you're 2 years into like
and like
needing a quarterback and you still haven't found one, and so now it's like okay, next year.
I would have rather him spent like instead of a $25 Woody Marks, I would have rather he went after like a Tyler Show or
Well, he could have, and I think that was the thing is like I think he was sleeping at the wheel a little bit, down by the river in the van, wherever the hell he lives. Um, because I want to say that the second copy of Jackson Dart was like well within like, or maybe it was the first copy. One of the copies of Jackson Dart, I think, were like doable. Where if like Taylor kind of condensed some of the shit that he spent money on, like the um,
who got
Rashard
those?
Smith, Woody Marks, DJ Giddens, Will Howard's. I think he could have just like pieced together a Jackson Dart there. I think that's the only kind of complaint uh, that I had there was it was doable for him to do that, and he just did not want to pivot off of that.
Mm-hmm.
He was stuck on Caleb Johnson and Travis Hunter. I think at one point, I think again part of this was he had Caleb Johnson, Travis Hunter locked in. He was not. There was no world where he was not going to go in on those players. He was also fucking around with RJ Harvey, and I think
Well,
those were the three
that's
players
a
that he was.
Bronco, yeah.
Well, right, and Pat Bryant. So like he was sticking with his Broncos and sticking with his Debbie rebates. Like that's how he does this. Um,
Who the fuck got
and somebody
Jackson
came
Dart?
in. Somebody came in late and bumped him off of Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey, and uh, he panicked about that, lost them both, and then went. I think Harvey was cheaper at the time, so he tried to lock down Harvey, and then whoever it was spread too thin and took Harvey from him, and he came back with Caleb Johnson and super late in the auction. So it was like that point, like the rebate couldn't have gotten him much. It may have helped him get that Jalen Milroe. I can't remember, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that was actually how the state of events went there. But yeah, it was very interesting that he kind of tends to do another one that kind of tends to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think he did a pretty decent job, but I would have tried to figure out something else for those like Pat Bryant price is good, but like $5 for Will Howard, like you said, Brashard Smith, Giddens, and Woody Marks could have gotten him Jackson Dart somewhere else, even with Milroe. Like he could have cobbled together some funds because I think Army got him for 48. TCU got the other Dart for 35, and 35 is like just $4 more than the Milroe price that he spent. So I don't hate it. The other two teams I thought that did really well, or I really liked the way their team is set up, what they got for their team was Texas Tech and West Virginia. I thought those two did a pretty decent job with pricing, value, what their team needed. I just those two are always have quality auctions. They don't really mess around too much, but I think both teams will be pretty good this year too.
Yeah, Texas Tech did good with the running back. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the hell did you like on Texas Tech? I was missing the Amari and Hampton. I was like, I just am seeing
Oh.
RJ Harvey and Shadur Sanders. Like, what the hell am I looking at here? Yeah, no, I think Texas Tech, it is also one of those, like, Texas Tech strikes pretty quick.
Mhm.
They move quick while the others are kind of like fucking around. Um, I want to say he got the first copy of both Hampton and Harvey. So like
Mhm.
those came off the board real quick for him, and then the rest of it is just he also might have had the first copy of Sampson. I can't remember, but he's one that kind of moves quick. Again, beneficial, you know, to those that wait, but again, you're also like letting
Well,
good players off the board. I
that's
don't
the
remember
thing.
what West
Yeah,
Virginia did.
West Virginia got Hampton, Burden, Tootin, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, Savion Williams. Like Tootin,
Yeah,
Burden, and Hampton are a pretty good three, and his Hampton was a pretty good value. I think he had a rebate for Hampton, but and Sampson. But I like it. I think they're both adding to both really quality teams that are likely going to benefit from those players being on them this season. So that'll close out the Big 12. Let's move on to Pac 12 here. Um, this one was a very interesting conference. My God.
Pac-12 was wild. So Pac-12 had the two most expensive copies of players that I think that I think they were the second and third most expensive players in like the history of the league. The
Yes.
Giantis going for
Yes.
208 and 207,
Oh.
only behind the Caleb Williams of 215 last year.
Mm.
So that was to Air Force and Oregon State, respectively. Um, I think one of the things with them being in all the chats, I think we hit on, I don't know, was it UCLA
Mhm.
that had a pretty good, ended up pretty good deal here.
I think they did great.
Oregon State was I was cracking up when he was bitching that this guy was refusing to spend money, nickeling and diming everything. Like, does this guy
I,
know what he's
I
doing?
thought he did
Like,
great.
I was cracking up, and so like I pulled it up at that point, and I was like, this isn't half bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not like there's
he
no like
zagged where
star
everyone
power,
was
but he was
zigging.
like
Yeah.
he was bargain. Yeah, he was bargain shopping. Like I think at that point he had um you know, a stranglehold on like that second tier running back market in the ETNs, Gordon's, Jordan James, Monangai, Brashard Smith. And I want to say he also had at that point like Loveland and Ferguson and Royals. And then just kind of by waiting and doing that, how that conference fell, like Egbuka and Hunter and Jalen Noel just kind of fell into his lap there. So I mean, very kind of again. I don't know if I want to call it impressive because I don't necessarily. Part of me tends to agree with Oregon that maybe it was like somebody that didn't know what they were doing and then just kind of
If
things
he didn't
fell
walk away with Egbuka and Hunter, I would have, yes, or just one of those
right,
two. I would have been like, yeah, that he didn't take advantage of what was available
right,
to him. But the fact that he
right,
got those two, he doesn't, and the fact that the barometer for some of these teams is that they needed to land one of those running backs. Like that almost seemed to be the barometer of it. Is this team going to be good? And yeah, top running backs are definitely going to set your contending team. But like, damn, timelines are to me are built on quarterbacks and wide receivers having a good runway ahead of you on those teams. Help with depth, help with like not paying premium on players that you're not ready to contend for. Like teams like Oregon and Air Force fill the need because they're two contending teams. They have really good teams. They're playing for championships this year. UCLA is not playing for a championship, regardless if it gets Genty or Hampton or Henderson. Could it make its team better? Yes. But I think there's a lot of real good value. I think maybe the only thing I would scoff at on his team is maybe Shadur at 15, but that's just like, and Jordan James at 24. But everywhere else, he had a bunch of value that he found. And its depth, yes, he could have maybe bundled that all for maybe another quality piece. But I think sometimes you just take what the board gives you and you spend what you can. He didn't have a lot of money to spend versus like some other teams, and I think the Pac-12 just generally had a lot less total dollars to spend. But I think he did a great job. Um, Back to your point on Air Force and Oregon State, like Boise State, Air Force, and Air Force State out of the first round. Oregon State and Boise were the ones bidding up the first copy of Genty, which went for 207. The second copy immediately went up, and Air Force came in like a hammer and took out Boise because Boise didn't have that big of a budget. And Boise eventually was smart enough to pivot and got like a half the price of an Omari and Hampton. I could be a skeptic, but I do not think that there's a world where Omari and Hampton is going to score half the points that Ashton Genty is going to score. Like that seems like a less plausible outcome, and to spend twice as much or $100 more just seems like ridiculous spent. And I get that they're in on the contending piece, but they could have grabbed any other of these assets and helped their team just as
Well, hell,
much.
and I mean it's the same thing. Like you, like throw RJ Harvey in that conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
he's getting a ton of hype. Like if you could go grab an RJ Harvey for $80, you have another $120. Like you can't tell me that like grabbing Tet McMillan and RJ Harvey doesn't make you a
A
better
better team, yeah.
team than it would be just having Gianti. Um, and so like it's wild. Um, but I think like an example of that might be like Oregon. Um,
I
you
think they did
know,
great. I think,
taking that step down and grabbing, uh,
cheap.
Omari and
Yep.
Hampton for $104, and like you're gonna get again, it's not gonna be this, maybe not gonna be the same production year one, but like 4 years worth, you're probably gonna get
Mm-hmm.
similar production to a Gianti. Value wise, you're definitely gonna get it comparatively speaking in terms of points to dollars spent. But then you also get to pick up like a
Dart
Jackson
Harris,
Dart, a
yeah.
Jaden Blue. I don't really like Devin Neal. Pat Bryant, Trey Harris. I think Deontay Thornton's interesting. Just grabbed him the other day, and you get a dart throw at Terrence Ferguson. Like, some of that stuff. Like, this might you can't tell me that this wouldn't have been a better, grab for an Oregon or an Air Force. The only thing would be like if you don't have the roster space for those depth throws, then
Sure. Yeah.
by all means. But I think for the most part, there are very few teams where I'd be like, oh, you don't have a player like this droppable now. Like looking at Oregon State, really the only players I'd be like, hey, the droppable ones you have are some of the guys that you probably just threw on like this year, like your Nick Nash's. Who else did he grab this year? Lan Larson, interesting pick. I didn't even think he was owned anywhere in the league, so that's kind of an interesting one. That Oregon State has him on there. But again, that would be kind of my only
Could have
counterpoint
cut
to being
Trey
like,
Lance for
yeah,
Christ's sake. He's
right,
still
yeah. I mean,
somehow on the
and you'll see
roster.
there's a lot of that kind of in the league where I'm just, and again, I don't know what it is, but like there are definitely some people that need like cut some of these guys. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the only counterpoint to being like, okay, hey,
Still a good team.
Gianti and
Like,
nothing else
yeah.
versus like a Marian Hampton and others. Because if you don't have room for the and others, then no. But like, you can't tell me that there's not room on Oregon State for like Trey Harris and whatever, whoever else is there. But
Well, the thing
um,
I struggle with, so I've kind of did a similar approach with Bijan because my team was good. I was going in on it, and I think Bijan was the best asset, pretty by far, far more than like what this class has with in terms of running backs. But and I spent a pretty premium on it, but I had a rebate. But I don't think what I didn't do was push him like exorbitantly high. Maybe it was like 160. Even 160 versus 200 is $40 of additional space that you can put towards your roster. To me, it's just like you said, we were mentioning. I don't think there's ever a player that's worth $200 in this format. That's absurd amount of money, and even just to get a second asset in, it's the market. So if you're really in on Genti, you're paying that premium, and that's clearly what the Pac-12 did. I think LD also was the floor in the early part of the auction for running backs, if I remember checking in on this. He was really
yeah,
pushing
I
prices
think
up,
he was, and I think that. I mean, I love him,
and
but
he
I
got
think that
burned. Yeah,
I think it really backfired on him. Kind of pushing prices up, not nailing down anybody. He really kind of only walked away with, and I want to say he has the most expensive Quinshawn Junkins, and it's not even close. Um, now again, there's some other guys like Jaden Blues, DJ Giddens, like
Tyler
great.
Shaw's
And
good. Grace.
the saving grace for him is probably the Tyler Shaw.
Yeah,
If that turns into something, then um,
a lot of value.
he's got kind of a real good kind of move. If Shaw can start and start competently, like maybe then it gives Colorado State like the ability to transfer a CJ Stroud or something like that to kind of recoup money back. But the other piece of this was he also grabbed Brees Hall. So to go okay, Brees Hall,
Yeah, yeah.
Judkins,
He spent like
Blue,
$30 on Breeze.
whatever.
So
So
yeah,
like, right, yeah. So I mean, he kind of put together, the whole picture thing here is pretty good, but it's just one of those where I don't know what the pricings of the other guys were, but like
I mean, he could have gotten
I
a
would have
hundred
probably rather
dollar
had a
Hampton.
104. That's what I
Yeah,
mean. I'd rather had the $104 Hampton and used, he could have used the $30 somewhere else. But again, I'd also argue that he probably, has one of the better like total hauls in terms of for this season.
yeah,
For 2025.
yeah. In terms of teams, we kind of hit them that I didn't think did a great job in the Pac-12. I didn't like Arizona State's price for Henderson at
Henderson,
all.
yeah.
He had a rebate on him, so he was like technically 149 and had like only a $10 rebate. So I didn't really love that one. That seemed like a really high premium, and he probably got stuck. I imagine if I were to go back and look at the transactions, you would probably see a lot of Colorado State bidding him up or setting a proxy high and seeing a lot of Arizona State bidding up to get that first copy because they had the rebate. And to me, it would have been like, all right, if it's getting too high, just let him go and know that you have the second copy. And you probably are going to find value in this because the bottom dropped out of the market near the end. I kind of liked what Washington did in terms of Egbuka, Henderson were both much more reasonable priced players. Jalen Royals is a good price. Jarquez Hunter got a lot of value and pieces to fit in. I think the Egbuka piece was a great one. Um,
I think Stanford did okay too. The module doesn't seem to really like them,
no, they
but
just
again, I'm assuming
picked four players.
most of the money spent was on most of it was spent on Ward.
Hmm.
I'm assuming.
Good value for
Um,
Ward.
so to go like Ward, Tootin, Burden, Higgins, I like the players. Again, I wish there would be was more to this. Like this is one of the rosters where I'm like, get some of these guys out of here. Like Devon Baker probably could find something better. Um, some of these tight ends like Luke Musgrave, Luke Schoonmaker. I don't even know, fucking. I guess he's who the fuck is Dallas. Um, just like some of those where it's just like okay, maybe like round this off a little bit better. But again, like don't hate like it's not bad. Like the players that they got aren't bad. It's just like there's not that like million pieces. I think this would have been a nice roster that also had like a Tyler Shaw because they have Rattler
Rattler,
already.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe again I don't know the money situation, but I just think that might have been a better like ad than throwing another running back in there. Although or not another running, yeah, Tootin. It's like maybe instead of Tootin, grab Shaw and something else because the running backs that they have like this. I don't know if Tootin really kind of moves the needle there. But yeah, I don't know. I think Pac-12 was like Pac-12 might have been one of the more
Yeah.
interesting, if not like more like fun kind of stories to follow in the auction.
It's definitely a disparity just given the sheer scale of like how things were spent. The other team I thought did really well was Arizona. They got like Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey at both very reasonable prices, and then filled in with Trey Harris and got like Pat Bryant and Tyler Shaw and like them at good prices. Like I liked that kind of class, especially for the makeup of Arizona's team. And maybe it's more of like we just got into a part where like the right teams in Pac 12 focused on the right type of players, like the contending teams focused on the top premium guys and things like that. That could very reasonably happen. I don't hate them, and that's maybe why UCLA got such value, Oregon got such value, and some of the teams that are maybe closer to contention, Air Force, Boise. Well, I don't think Boise's near contention as much, but Washington, Colorado State, they're like more contending teams. Oregon and Air Force are both contending. They're like lower on the rankings because they just spent. They were more like less is more type model. So yeah, they're a far more interesting conference to follow as well. All right, last Power Five is SEC. This group is very similar in terms of style. They're very consistent. They pay really high premiums for top players in every auction. And then I don't know, they just like the middle is like this soup of value, and then they end up spending a bunch on players near the end that just like I don't know, don't make a lot of sense. So, um, yeah, interesting. I asked Robbie, who is Arkansas, kind of what happened. He kind of gave a synopsis of like certain teams did really well. There was a really high premium on Genti, just like in the Pac-12. Um, they didn't have nearly the same level of a floor for running backs as Pac-12 did. They had a little more interesting wide receiver market with a more expensive LSU. Luigi paid more of a premium for Travis Hunter. Um, I think the QB market in this one was very odd. Like the top Cam Ward copy went for $81, and the second one went for 66, which was maybe the cheapest Cam Ward, which went to Tulane, who I thought did okay. Um, I think out of everyone, Robbie thought the one who did the worst was South Carolina. And if I can recall from briefly paying attention to how this auction went, they just kind of were hedging their bet on Genti, missed out on both, and had to pivot and spent really high on Jaden Higgins, really high on Tyler Warren, and still spent a premium on Matthew Golden and didn't have much else outside of that. So I think that one's a little suboptimal, and I could agree that they probably missed out, but they had to spend it somewhere, so they made somewhere else. So I think the takeaways here is Genti was really expensive. QB market was not nearly as valued in SEC comparatively, and they had some of the similar trends as other ones. I don't know if there's any team that sticks out to you as doing really, really well, or you like their
Yeah.
haul.
Yeah, well, real quick on South Carolina, I think the one thing that can, again, I don't know what's available on the waiver wire in the SEC, but like this is one of the teams where I'm like, okay, why the hell do you own Jared Wiley, Devin Culp, Tyquan Thornton, like some of these guys that aren't producing, haven't produced. Like Tyquan Thornton is got to be in what year 3 in the NFL. Like, dude only had 7 points last year. Like, that's not going to change. You're going to have a better luck like getting your 7 points from somebody. Like, again, grab one of those, cut some of these guys. The Anthony Golds, like get rid of some of these guys and backfill. Trey Lance is the one you brought up earlier. Get rid of some of these guys and backfill with something that has a better shot because that shot might, for as bad, I don't want to, I feel bad like shooting on somebody, but like for as bad on paper as it looks and as bad as it is on the metrics, like the one thing that can save you is like if you hit on that somebody, again, there's not going to be a Puka every year. There's not going to be, but like if you hit on something of value from the waiver wire, like that would be what I would do. Just kind of flatten this out a little, or round this off a little bit for, right. I really liked what Georgia did. Again, I don't know what the SEC is doing. I think Luigi had a good auction, and I'm also going to throw Georgia up there. And it's just like you just let your two perennial powerhouse teams get like better. Like how on earth you let? And this is also kind of fits like what Georgia did. Kind of fits with what maybe we were hinting would be better moves for Air Force and Oregon State. Georgia was able to get a RJ Harvey and a Tet McMillan, but then also a Trey Harris, and then took the same dart throws that I've kind of been, throwing out there this whole time in the Arian Smiths, Xavier Restrepo's, maybe a Nick Nash. I don't know if I put Nick Nash on there, but like he's on that list for a lot of people. Torrey Horton's, like the Alec Iomanors, like just and again, I think a really good kind of auction for Georgia. Like I said, Luigi did really well. He went all in. I think Travis Hunter was his. But Travis Hunter, who the hell did he go all in on? He went all in on somebody.
Yeah, but he ended up making a lot
this
more
is the wrong team.
with Trey Harris.
I clicked on the wrong purple team. But yeah, again, you let him potentially get like a Tyler Shaw. Like if that works out, like you let him fix his quarterback position super cheap. Travis Hunters. I like the Jalen Royals. I like the Kyle Williams. Like Terrence Ferguson, even like Tyler Warren's on there. It's just like one of those where like he got a lot of good pieces, and based on the track record, he does pretty well in kind of picking them out. So like I'm happy to see that I have a couple of these guys that he went after. So
the other team I really liked was Ole Miss. So I felt like
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
I thought they just this team has been in a rebuild for like the last year or two, and I think like they've just taken this very good foundational approach. They've like thrown a few darts, no pun intended, and then like landed a lot of value, like Jackson Dart at $21. It's just like I don't know. That just to me that feels such a good deal for a first round quarterback, even if he's not like this amazing thing. Like the New York Giants are eventually going to give him a look. They have to. Like it's a first round quarterback. He's gonna get a look, and Russell Wilson's the only one in front of him. Like $20 doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a lot to give up. And then Tootin's a good one. I think he got pretty market rate for Omari and Hampton, and then he just fleshed it out with a bunch of more depth pieces that I don't hate the prices that he paid for any of them, and some of them are value, like Pat Bryant or Isaac Tesla. Like those are good deals for a team, and I think he just kind of went with this really good approach. We already talked about Tulane a little bit with his Cam
Big.
Ward copy was just a huge value in this, in my perspective. $66 felt like a pretty good deal for a first overall quarterback.
Yeah, and I think Auburn kind of along the lines of again without knowing what like because I didn't pull it up to look at the price point, but I think Auburn might have had similar kind of luck that Ole Miss had in that grabbing a Jackson Dart and then just some like solid players after that.
This is Taylor's dad.
Jack,
Why can't
Jack,
why can't Taylor auction like this sometimes? Like
I don't know. Maybe it's a
what's this?
Taylor burner account, and where like this is what Taylor would do if he wasn't like avidly stuck on adding Denver Broncos and then his two Devy picks. Maybe like just hint at some strategy here moving forward. Maybe
Maybe ask his
make your
dad what.
Devy pick a
Yeah,
freaking quarterback or ask your dad for help. I don't know, but I kind of like, again, Dart, Egbuka, Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh. Like, I think that's four really kind of solid. And then to fill in, I talked about Jaden Blue earlier. I think Damian Martinez is an interesting
hmm
kind of grab.
hmm
Um, same with some of these other kind of players that are sitting here. Like, I liked LaQuint Allen pre-draft. I don't necessarily like him in Jacksonville. Kyle Monangai is the one that I took as a dart throw, so I just I kind of like that, um, that whole picture there for Auburn.
And one team I hate saying this because he got like some good value from, but I felt like there could have been more out of Mississippi State. Like Brahmi's team, he got good value with Cam Ward, and then Luther Burden was around market price. But then all he added with that value was Cam Scatabo at above market rate. Trevor Etienne got a free Shadur Sanders and Xavier Restrepo. Like I just feel like there could have been more to that team that I would have liked a lot more than predominantly those three pieces. Shadur Sanders for $0 feels like a great like dart throw that you're gonna just see what happens, but there could have been something else to that team that would have made me a little more excited. I
Yeah, I feel the same way kind of about Kentucky, where I'm just like, okay, like got Judkins again at that point. Without looking at the pricing, you could assume that that's like the third or fourth highest priced out running back, and then was able to grab Matthew Golden, and then like some other people, like a Pat Bryant's okay, but like there's nothing really left. Like I don't know. It just leaves me wanting more. It's just one of those where again, and I like the pieces that are there. Like I like Torrey Horton, I like Deontay Thornton. I like Aya Manor, but it's just like one of those things where it's like on average everybody has like 200 and some dollars. This is just one where I'm having a hard time figuring out where the money went.
Yeah, and I think another team that I don't feel great about was Missouri. They I think showed up a little late, but what they grabbed for a team that needs so much just didn't feel great to me. Trevion Henderson was a little bit pricey. Colston Loveland at $40 felt like a pretty big reach at that point, and then just getting Jalen Noel, Jaden Blue, Royals, and them. I don't know. That didn't feel like enough for a team like that. So
Yeah, I'm not going to shit on Adam though. He knows it from he moved from the Buffalo Bulls
Buffalo, yeah,
team, so like he's
that's why I think he
built
showed up
good
late.
team.
I think
So
he
it's
might have just
just
showed up
like
late because he usually puts a
yeah,
pretty
so
good
it's one
quality
of those.
product up. But
But I like if you're gonna have dart throws with the later tier running or later tier wide receivers, I think Jalen Noel and
yeah,
Jalen Royals are like really good. Like you're either gonna get like in Noel somebody that's gonna be like Tank Dell esque output. And then it's the same thing like Jalen Royals is like one of those where it's like
it's the Chiefs. You can get anything from
he's
them.
on the Chiefs. They tend to like use him. It could be great, but it's also one of those where like he only like runs routes on the left side of the field. So like I don't know how that translates to the NFL. So it's just like one of those things where it's like the pieces might this might be one of those teams where it's just like hey, this doesn't look really good, but then the dice fall a certain way, and you're like, wait a second, like he did all right because he has a lot of the guys that are in that like boomer bust category. Like I put Jaden Blue in that category, Brashard Smith in that category, Noel Royals, even Terrence Ferguson's kind of in that category with the draft capital and the potential of being in the Rams, offense. The only really like solid thing that I'd say is like Colston Loveland. Even like Travion Henderson has that like boomer bust to him, like where it's like, he could be this, but he's also on the Patriots who tend to use like 35 running backs. So it's just
Yeah,
like one of those
and
things where it's
Ramondre
just like,
Stevenson's still there, yeah. So
right. And so that's one of those things where it's just like, it's interesting. I don't know, but it could boom, it could bust.
yep. All right, we'll move on to our final conference here, and then we'll give some next steps for the league. Is Minor. Overall, I think Minor kind of had a weird misstep, if you ask me. They did not spend enough on the top players, and they spent too much on the depth pieces. Do you get that same sentiment, or do you think something differently for them?
Yes and no. So I don't know how many people know this, but my girlfriend is in minor, and she was about like day one, she was fine. Day two morning, she was fine. But like the end of day two into day three, she was like losing her mind. Um, I think like it was one of those where it was just like certain teams were just letting players off like they weren't interested, like they weren't bidding, they weren't. So you were getting some deals early on, kind of what you said. So like your Giantis, your Hampton,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of who else, like Caleb Johnson, even, like I'm trying to think of who. Like I want to say Tet was super cheap. Um, there might have been some
Travis
cheap
Hunters were
Luther
cheap.
Burden. Yeah, yeah.
Henderson went
There was
cheap.
just some weird. It was like the wide receiver market there. The outside of I think one copy or two copies of Ward. The quarterback market was cheap. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. Like yeah, the Jackson Dart went for 59 and
Shador,
38, so like
what was that
super
Shador
freaking cheap.
one?
The Shador one was stupid. That Shador was like $50. I don't know where it went or how are these ranked. Um, maybe it auto corrected because there was a, yeah, I think
A rebate?
there's a
Oh,
35. I think there's a rebate, so it corrected down to 35. But like there was like a $55 Shador, and you're just like, there's a $38 Jackson Dart
yeah.
and a 59. Like
What are we
what
doing?
were we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think part of that is minor, and I think I may have dropped this hint earlier when we were talking about it. I can't remember. I think the Debbie rebate just f's with minor. You get these guys like they're looking at what's going on in major. They're watching the board, they're looking like I want to say like a lot of these guys like refuse to pivot and they get locked in, especially on the guys they have the rebates for. Um, I'd be interested in not sitting down and figuring this out now, but like moving forward, like what percentage of the teams in minor like stick with their rebate
Oh,
players?
we could figure that
Um,
out right now.
because it's it seems to be like that's the idea there, or everybody's just like, because again pricing's a little wonky in minor, maybe a little bit more expensive, that everybody's just putting $20 on everything. So then like instead of the floor being like $5 for the things that are like somewhat useless, it's like $20. And I think that we kind of see that. But there was definitely a lack of value at the wide receiver position. Again, this was across the league, I felt like this year, which is why, and we didn't talk about my team or your team, but I think that you and I shopped very similarly,
Mhm.
in that like I was grabbing the Matthew Goldens, Ted McMillans. I don't even know who I won, to be honest. There's another wide
So
receiver, right? Oh,
modest.
Burden, Luther Burden, Loveland. I think you targeted Burden, Loveland, similar wide receivers. Um, there was just like that wasn't valued across the league this year, and then Minor, for whatever reason, didn't value it at all either, because there were some really stupid, cheap, like
I don't know.
copies
I
again
don't.
of like the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. Like there's a $33 Jack Bash in here, which I'm just like, okay,
Yeah, but then there's like an
that's super cheap for minor.
$86 Luther Burden and an $85 Emeka Egbuka, because part of this is some teams don't show up. Like, I think we had to try to find Buffalo, the new Buffalo team, just
Right.
make sure that he was present, and then fucking Dalton always shows up late and ends up putting a bunch of money down. But there were a few copies that went way high and a few copies that went way low. Like the second copy of Tet went for like $80, and then the guy had the rebate, so it ended up for like essentially $60. And that just felt like such a good fucking deal, um, for that team. I also don't think everyone spent. This is where I think a minor needs to. If I were to think of this logically, the top players should be going for the most expensive price across the league. Like if any copy of these players are going to go for $200, my bet would be on minor. Like Ashton Genty copies going under 150, both of them in minor seems implausible for me. Neither of them had that rebate, if I remember correctly. We had an Omari and Hampton at 130. Cam Ward at 120 seems about what I would expect in minor. The second copy of Omari and Hampton went for 109. Caleb Johnson was a little expensive. Travion Henderson was cheap. Uh, to me, I think you're right. I think a lot of this is their minor is just pretty unfamiliar to all this stuff, and they're trying to figure out what's appropriate, and that's kind of the point of minor. But to some
Well, and
degree.
that's the thing too, is like a lot of these, like I want to say a lot of the new teams were in minor, so that plays a role in it. You have some inactivity in minor on a yearly basis. I won't say names, but
I'd say it, Dalton.
we all
Dalton.
know who it is.
Yeah.
Um, and then when you have somebody else that shows up late or whatever it is, like that stuff just compounds on it. I also think again, minor was one where Nevada spent all of their money in the upperclassmen auction, so there's a team removed from that. And then some of these teams, and again, we'll get into it. I didn't really like what Chuck did at Ball State. I feel like Chuck wanted to be one of the teams that goes all in on one player, but then like didn't want to go all in on that player, if that makes sense. Like, um, again, with he being
Because
in
he could have
minor,
he could have had other assets, right? Like I don't think the
right,
130 was even remotely close to what his budget was. So he should have been spending
right.
more other
Well, but
places.
he spent, and that's what I mean. He spent, and so like he went. Like
Or did he have
I think
upperclassmen too?
he went in an upperclassman because he was talking about a couple people. I think interest in like Jordan Addison, maybe she had, and
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else.
so, yeah. You got Addison. That's
And
right, and
so
Bateman,
he went in on Addison. He was trying to do Addison
Stevenson.
and no, who the hell was that person? Bijan. He was trying to do Bijan, wanted Bijan to push all in, and then I think the price for Bijan got out of control, and he was the high bidder on Addison, so he couldn't kind of go back to Bijan, so he lost out on Bijan, and then I think the part of, again, not blaming this on Ball State, but I think this is also part of like where you saw the running back market get set. I think then what happened was Chuck was stuck in that $130 to $140 total budget range. Wanted to go all in on Gianti, couldn't get that done,
Mhm.
and then pivoted to the next best thing, which was Hampton, and he spent on the expensive copy instead of getting the cheap one. So I think it was just one of those where he kind of got bullied on trying to go all in and didn't. He might have been better off served kind of doing the strategy, of again, RJ Harvey was a little, at least the first copy was $90. I don't know what the second copy was, 84. So again, maybe going $80 on an RJ Harvey, um,
Or even
and then
just
having $50 somewhere else would have been a better pivot for Ball State. But I think that's I think he was the driving force in the aggressive pricing for the top end running backs because he was one of the teams that needed one. And then without kind of wanting to put the hammer down, you kind of had that ceiling set, in that 130, 140 range. And then everything else in the entire division just kind of stacked
fit
behind
under
that.
that.
And
Yeah.
then what happened, I think, was then that's where you got the first copy's stacked, and then the second copy's where people are going, okay, I need this or I need. That's where you started to see like the weird ass shit where like Burden was more expensive than Egbuka,
Hmm.
or Travis Hunter was cheaper than everything on the board because I think they just forgot about Travis Hunter. Um, it was a wild kind of ride over there.
Yeah, I think the running back market should have been a little hotter. I think it should have seen higher prices for players, and they let some, like, if I was Chuck, given that I got Ramondre Stevenson, I almost would have went even in on Travion
Henderson,
Henderson,
right?
and been that focus because he could have gotten Henderson for $100, had $30 more to add something else, which then Miner could have gotten you just about anything. But I think there were some really bad deals. Let me see if I can find some examples. So like Dylan Sampson went for $44 to Bowling Green. I think that's a terrible deal. Shedeur Sanders went for 35 for Wyoming. That's a
That
terrible
and that
deal.
was and that's with a. I'm fairly certain that is with a rebate.
Yes. So yeah, that's the final price including the rebate. That's still way too high. I think Wyoming's a new coach,
Oh
so
well,
he
yes, it's
usually
way too
has.
high.
Luther Burden 86, Jackson Dart at 59 was even higher. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the QB prices because Miner's a different beast. There's just far less QB depth to go around. But then like another $35 Dylan Sampson, Trey Harris at 50. I can live with that price. Another Trey Harris at 48. Will Howard at $21. Woody Marks at 30. Devin Neal at
There's a 25
25.
Devin Neal, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, and that's what I mean. I think a lot of this is like, and again, I don't think Woody Marks is
TJ
necessarily a Debbie
Gideons. Oh God.
person, but like, I think what happens is like when they see these guys come off the board like early on, so like some of these guys aren't Debbie prospects, but like a Dylan Sampson, pretty good chance he was.
He was
Damian
early. Yeah.
Martinez, I don't know. Right, and that's what I mean. So like they would have been teams that were like you toss them out there and guys are like, oh, I have $20 rebate. So like they either already throw $20 on them, which is why you see a lot of like if you look at the like it's so weird, but like Devin Neal is at $20. DJ Giddens at $20, Pat Bryant's at $20, Isaac Tesla's at $20. Like all of these guys that just sit straight at $20. And then you have like the Woody Marks at 21. There's a 25 Devin Neal. These are all like these mid-tier, like potentially Devy prospect players. Um, that I think that's exactly what's going on. Is teams are putting $20 on them and they're getting auto raised to $20, or flip side of that is they're Devy rebate players and guys are going, well, I'll throw $20 on it and or $19 on it, $17 on it. I think that's maybe what happened with the $17 Shador Sanders copy was maybe there was
I,
like, oh, we'll throw around $20
mhm.
on it, and if the person that has the rebate really wants them, they'll spend 20. If not, like I'll get them for right around $20. And I think that that's kind of what we see a little bit because all of those guys, if you look below the $20 mark, are all guys that are probably you got a deal on the price point at that point, like a $15 Jalen Royals, $14 Jalen Royals, $13 Jaden Blue. I think for what he was across the league is a pretty good price. Um, $12 Jordan James, $12 Torrey Horton. There's a Jalen Noel there for $11. The Jarquez Hunters for $11. I think those are just guys that weren't on that Devy list, and they all kind of went for either below average or just kind of right on league average.
Mhm.
Anything around 20 and higher, they just kind of the the pricing was just bonkers. And again, I think those were all Devy rebate players. So I think that that's what's going on in minor is that teams are so cash struck that they're just like, I got to get my $20 back regardless of how I get it. Like, even if I spend $20 on something that's not worth $20.
Yeah. Because I mean, when you look at the residual, like on the module, it's so crazy when you look at the comparison of the most expensive, like overvalued players, the ones that went for way higher versus the undervalued. It's just they didn't spend enough at the top. Like that's just where it comes down to. Like they did not spend enough on the top assets to push it because there are deals for Genty, McMillan, Judkins, Henderson, Genty, Travis Hunter, both copies, Omarion Hampton, Jalen Noel, Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins. Like all of those should be the more expensive. Like they should be a plus in the residual, not minus. And I think Minor needs to give the
I don't know. I
attitude.
don't know.
I do think this. I think they need to give the attitude that if they're going to let money sit, that they that money that's being saved by these guys that are getting top end talent comes back around on the depth. You got to make people pay for some of these players. It's almost like the opposite of Pac-12, where Pac-12 had almost too aggressive. There's something not being aggressive enough, where you're letting these guys get deals on players, and then they get to come back around and hit you again on near the end of the auction where they have money still available, and they get to drive up these players that aren't worth as much. And now you're spending more on less talent. So like teams, I think Bowling Green did a terrible job this auction. They spent way too much on Dylan Sampson, Woody Marks, DJ Gideons, and the only real value of players that they got was Tyler Warren and Colson Level, and that's terrible. That's a terrible auction, Neil, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I think Wyoming again was another example. UNLV was okay. Probably paid a bit more for some depth pieces that just isn't warranted, like Devin Neal and Woody Marks and Jalen Milrow is a little expensive, but a little forgivable. Can we talk about New Mexico State? Because they were the ones that gave the most into the transfer market, and I don't think they got enough out of the auction. Might have spent in some weird places. They still got some decent players, but I think they could have done more with the budget that they had. They had like 300 and
Oh shit.
some odd dollars, and they walked away with just Cam Ward, Tet, Trey Harris, and Cam Scatabo. Like to me, that doesn't seem like that's good enough for the amount of money they had. I don't know if you think differently, but
I'm working on figuring out which logo is New Mexico State so I can click
they're
on it
the
here.
Cowboys, the Aggies at the top. They're the number one class in
Oh.
minor.
Yeah, here we go. Um, I don't know. I mean, they needed a quarterback. They got the best quarterback.
I don't have any I
I
don't have
think
any
that's
problem
hard.
with those top guys going for the price that they
Um,
did. I have the problem that he didn't get enough and spent like $35 on Dylan Sampson, $20 on Isaac
yeah,
Tesla. Like that to
yeah,
me, I'd rather have it go and try to get one more premium player.
yeah. But it's also looking at the roster. Like this was one of the rosters that needed to fill a ton
Yeah.
of spots, and it's one of those where it's just like I don't know. I mean, I don't mind like the dart throws here of like even like I don't mind Samson Scott. Again, it was I think it was a stupid expensive Samson, but like I don't mind Samson Scatabo, Pat Bryant, Trey Harris.
I think
Who
those are
else is
good
on
depth
here?
pieces. I think he
Ted
spent too much for
McMillan,
him.
Tesla. Like I don't mind it. Yeah, but I think at the same time, it's like one of those where like if you're going into it and you're like, okay, I need depth and I need this, like when you have yourself spread like that, like there's,
Oh, okay. I see what you're
and maybe
saying.
that's part of it
Yeah.
too. Like it's hard to then be like, okay, how do I like even if you wanted to get back
Yeah. Okay.
on somebody, it's hard.
A lot of
I think
players,
that
yeah, on the
at least
board.
it's one of the right. And I think it's one of those things where like Miners got more players on the board than any other conference. Um, for the most part, especially when they're like this, like they're not. It's not badly priced. This is but because what happens in minor, again, from me being there and then having key in it now, like especially now, um, when you get towards the end, it's literally like people are throwing money at like stupid shit. Like it's almost like for minor, you have to like get what you want off of the board before you end up with like $44 Dylan Sampsons because
Well,
there are
that's the
more
thing.
teams
Dylan
in there that
Sampson
have
went.
more money and
That
like
Dylan Sampson was the first copy that went off,
yeah, right,
and
right. I
that's
just
that's
it's an
stupid.
example. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
of like I want to say like where are the players? Um, what the fuck am I looking at? Um, this is not what I wanted. Um, I feel like it's just like one of those things where it's just like there's a lot more going on in minor, and it's just like you have to kind of navigate where you think the deals are. And again, at least here I don't mind the players that I named,
Hmm.
whereas like some of them are like where you were naming Bowling Green's players like
That's bad. Yeah.
that right like those are not guys that I want to Warren's okay. There might have been one other one that was okay, but like I don't want to
Your top piece can't be
um
Tyler Warren, and that's my
right,
opinion.
right, right. And I think that that's one of those things too, where it's like, I think Bowling Green. I'm trying to pull them up real quick. Um, Here we go. Might have been just one of those things where, like, yeah, this is what it looks like. He only had one, two, three, four, five roster, six roster spots. I want to say, and my guess is he had $200 and went, okay,
I'm just gonna spend it
I'm
all. Yeah.
spending. I'm gonna right, and I think that's what he did. Is I think he divided it up and went, okay, I'm gonna just get 6 or 7 guys at $30 to $40 a piece, and probably put $30 or $40 on every single player that he. And then that's what he got. A bunch of players that are either okay priced in the $30 to $40 range, or ones that weren't there but got pushed up because of other people doing whatever reason.
Yeah.
And like again, like that's what it looked like to me for Bowling Green. Um, I think who else did I thought looked pretty well?
I kind of like what
What the hell?
Arkansas State did. To be honest, they might have paid a little bit more, but I think for a minor haul, I think they did a pretty decent job. I also liked Chris in Western Michigan. I kind of liked the deals he got. He kind of floundered near the end, but
Oh, Miami, Ohio was the one.
you like
Yeah,
Miami, Ohio?
Miami, Ohio did. Yeah, they did pretty well. I was looking.
Oh yeah,
It's hard for me with all the red freaking
logos. Yeah.
logos down here to figure out who's who. So like I'm just clicking. Yeah, I mean, in minor to specifically get like a Hampton Harvey combo, I think that's great.
And Scatabo,
Um,
that's pretty good.
um, yeah, there's not much behind that, but again, to have that kind of be your haul, I'd almost like it's one of those things like to Bowling Green's extent to just be like, hey, listen, just because you have 6 roster spots, don't divide your money by 6.
Yeah.
Do this, like divide your money by 2 or 3, and kind of hammer it home. But I think that they did pretty well. It'll be interesting. If maybe you get a hit on one of these, like if a Deontay Thornton hits or like a Jamari Thrash in year 2 out of the slot, if Cleveland steps up, like, um, never know. But then I think the dart throws are just kind of what I've been hitting on all night, like Xavier Restrepo, Tez Johnson, just guys that, again, year 1 probably aren't going to help you do anything, but might have some value down the road. So I think Miami did kind of a really good job navigating essentially the discounted running back market there in minor. I want to say one other team did really well. Let me see.
Looking at the
Do,
auction
do,
summaries
do.
right now, the thing I still am struggling with, and this is giving me further evidence that I think they need to spend more on top guys, is there some teams that still have money even after weeks time that have like $20, $50 still in their budget, and that just,
Left over.
yeah, that they didn't spend, and I feel like that just can't happen. Like that needs to
Name
be.
names. I want names.
So I know Ohio showed up late because Angelo's in Germany, so he's obviously on a different time scale. But he's got $50 left over. Nevada, which is a team that we lambasted on just spending $150 on
You said that was a
Bijan.
great move.
I like it for. Did I say that for that team? If I did, that must be for a specific reason, but I can't remember. But for the prices that all these other players went for a Bijan, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it anymore. But he still has $40 left over. Like that, why didn't that get spent somewhere? Wyoming's got 19, Buffalo's got 20, Central Michigan's got 21. I know there's stuff like eventually you just got nothing left to spend it on. But like that to me seems further evident that some of these top end guys just have to get higher. They have to get higher in price to utilize this money better, push more money out of the field,
Well, yeah,
and
I
get
don't
better.
know, and I think I wanted to comment on this. Sorry to cut you off because I'll forget
Yeah.
again if I don't. Like, I don't mind where Gianti's priced here, like 150, 130. Even the copy of Amari and Hampton that's 131, I think that's too expensive. Like, the Cam Ward at 130. I don't mind that their cap is a little lower. Like, what I necessarily don't like is that, like, the way they tiered the players, if that makes sense. Like the way they valued players. Like Ted McMillan should be over $100. Like no questions asked here. Like same thing with like Egmeka Egbuka. Like there should be a copy that's like pushing $100. I think that
Oh,
they
really?
struggled like the same
Okay.
thing. Like the Travis Hunters are stupid cheap. Like
Hmm.
Travis Hunter went for $100 plus in every other conference, and so like I think it's that aspect of like not throwing, like, for whatever reason the wide receiver market just didn't make sense. Even like Matthew Golden's like, again, like the one copy went for 71. I think you said that Arkansas State maybe spent a little bit more money for players, but like the other Matthew Golden,
Yeah, I'm fine with
I
that.
think he got Matthew Golden. It's like $55. Like that's just kind of like anybody that went discount shopping, um, in those tiers, like even a Jaden Higgins, like $55, like minor, like he should be like $70. No, like again, it's crazy saying it, but like that's where these players should be in minor. Like they're I'm trying to think, like the Jackson Dart second copy at 38 shouldn't be 38. That should be north of 50.
I think that they
The
just
game,
need to spend like about $10 more on those top end guys. I don't need it to be like $20, but consistently like $10 more. Because I then think
yeah.
you're just going to get the scarcity piece is the problem that I don't think they're grasping. And again, new players,
Well,
they got to figure that out. But like they just
oh
need to
right.
stretch it a bit more because that's how you get this money out of there, and then also how you get better deals on the back end. Like fighting over Dylan Sampson's for almost $50 or Chadur, even rebate aside, is just kind of mind boggling. But they'll the more consistency that they do this, the more familiar they get, the better they'll get at the format. It's just it looks odd right now because they have money still sitting there, like collectively $200 and almost $50 of the budget still available. And mind you, there's still other teams that haven't spent everything in other auctions. Big 12 at 81, Big 10 at 48, ACC at 97. But to be at 250 is still a good chunk of money.
Right.
Some
Well,
of
and I
it's
think some of
rebates,
it
but
too, without paying attention to the board, some of it too can be kind of what I've hinted at a couple times here with like when you have teams that have $20 left or they have the
mm-hmm.
$50 left, like part of that is, and you've alluded to it too, is like you have to be aware of what's actually coming off the auction board. Not like shit gets recycled. Like like people will talk about like, oh my god, like let me get my nominations because the same freaking copy of a player just keeps getting reset and cycled through and yada yada yada, and that's fine. But like you have to pay attention to like who's getting bid on, who's like how many teams are maybe involved in on a player, and have that realistic like what do I like? What are the chances that I can get this one player versus the three different ones, or do I have to pick one? Because I think a lot of what Miner does is okay. I have $50 left. I'm going to split that between three people.
Yeah.
And what happens, especially at the end of Miner, is where you see these guys get priced crazy, and you go, okay, I'm going to throw $50, split it between three guys, walk away for the day, and come back, and lo and behold, you've been priced out of everything, and now your $50 can't buy you
And you're just
any of those
you're
players,
recycling. Yeah, you're just
right?
like recycling the
And
same
so
board.
I think it's one of those things where it's just like there has to be maybe a little bit better of a mindset in terms of like, okay, I just need to throw, you know. But again, there's no reason that Travis Hunter shouldn't have been like the
Close
Travis
to
Hunter
100.
copies in
Yeah.
this league are probably $30 cheaper than what they should have been. Same thing. I think Agbuka's in that same category. Um, Golden, Tet McMillan, Super is probably $20 too cheap. There's just a little bit of like even there's a Jack Besh copy that's probably $10 or $15 too cheap. That should just adds up, and I think part of it is like just kind of condensing. Same like Arkansas State, we talked about had a super cheap copy of Kyle Williams. At least I think for like the format or for the conference, $26.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'd like to see Miner like push that
Oh, and
closer to 40.
Their Tootin was only 24. Like those,
Yeah,
like I mean, like those are examples of where it gets a little wonky, and like Dylan Sampson being $20 more than Tootin is kind of insane. Um, and I don't mind the Jackson Dart that he paid for at $59. Like to me, that's a premium position in a very scarce conference. Like those types of throws need to be a little higher. But I'd rather be putting those dart throws on Jackson Dart, again, no pun intended, than like Shadur Sanders. Because again, it's a higher value with risk, and maybe I'm just not basing in the scarcity enough. But to me, it just they seem like they got to push the envelope a little better on the players that actually matter instead of pushing the envelope on players that don't that aren't likely going to move the needle as much. They definitely have a value and a part to play, but you ask me, I'd rather spend $10 more on Matthew Golden's or Jaden Higgins or something like that, or Tet McMillan's or Travis Hunter's like $20 more than like trying to fight over scraps.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind the running back prices. I think the problem here was the league as a whole
Overvalued running back
downplayed the
owners.
val
Yeah.
overvalued the running back and then downplayed the wide receivers. Um, and it's one of those that probably anybody that went heavy on wide receivers probably going to make out like a bandit. At least that's what I'm hoping for. I think that's what you're hoping for based on the teams that we constructed with the draft this year.
I don't know if like
But I think
making
that
out
that's
with a
just
bandit is like the expectation with it. I just think that there's like a
yeah. But if
point
you
of
look,
value.
hold on, how the hell do I work this thing? Um, how do you make this go for the whole league? I wish I knew how to do this.
Go for the
Oh,
whole league.
yeah, I figured it out. Um,
Okay.
I don't know. Like looking at that's reverse. Looking at the teams, like I don't know. I feel like there's a good bit of value, at least in the residual, like on the wide receivers,
Yes.
for these teams
Yeah.
that had like good numbers, and I think that that's just like just looking at kind of what we've kind of discussed as you go like auction to auction or whatever. Like if you look at the top 35 ish teams, like at 35 is Virginia. And again, I'm not going to click on everybody's roster. I'm going to try to do this off of memory. But like 35 is Virginia. Virginia has Tet McMillan. I'm assuming they have other wide receivers. You're there at 34. I don't know who you have. I know you have Burden. I know you have Besh. If you want to fill in what other wide receivers you have. I think Auburn, we talked about. I want to say that he has two wide receivers, that he got a Hunter and somebody else. Um, Utah State's on here. That's key. She got Burden and Golden and Hunter. We didn't talk about Oklahoma State, but I want to say that he grabbed some wide receivers. Um, Taylor's on here. Taylor went to Hunter. Um, Wisconsin's on here, and I think that he went two wide receivers or three wide receivers. Um, I'm on there, and I went wide receiver heavy. I think that just again that there's a lot of way too much value at the wide receiver position across the entire league, and then when Miner tried to like match that in terms of like okay, like if Jancy is the top player here, and then this was the like,
Oh, reading
I
off
just
other
think that they
boards. Yeah.
played. Yes, I think they just went too there was too much just hey like don't value the wide receiver and so like they were unwilling to put wide receivers up there above the running backs and I think that that was like the massive slip up. The quarterback pricing looks okay, the quarterback ranking like in terms of where the players are makes sense. Even the tight end stuff is not terrible. It might be a little, at least for the top ones, it might be a little low,
Hmm.
but it's not terrible. I think it's just a massive miscalculation on the league as a whole at the wide receiver position, and then it's just exemplified in Minor um, because they have more that they're dealing with, more players on the board, uh, more Debbie rebates, new owners, things like that. That just kind of, and then you have some guys that come late that it just kind of makes it an interesting recipe because again, there's not too much like at least I know I do this is like when the first copy of like somebody comes off the board, I either then immediately make a decision of like, okay, I'm not interested in that player anymore. Like the second copy, I'm not touching because it's too expensive, or hey, I might pivot and really like this because nobody else seemed to kind of bid on this or want this or value this, and that's kind of again how I ended up with the residual of negative $68. Um, is that I kind of let the board play and then see kind of where the value is, and that's exactly where the value was this year. It was just like nobody
Yeah.
was
I
going
think
after wide receivers.
I think the wide receivers and then some of those like Jackson Darts copies were likely if you were to look at residual scores, some of the places that teams saw that there are a few teams that found real good values in running backs, but I think those are very limited circumstances. Like UCF, I know when I was bidding, I got a pretty good deal on a Judkins, even, and then I had a rebate, which just further compounded it. Syracuse, Washington both got like a sweet deal because I think what they did, Washington actually did a little something interesting. Russ did something interesting that I'll bring up in a second. But what they did is they didn't necessarily fixate on one running back. They maybe played the board and figured out which one had the best value, because as more time goes, usually in an auction, more people are soaking up funds and there's just less money available to be spent on. So somewhere there's going to be a deal that breaks. And some teams that are patient enough or just willing to kind of play the board a bit more can find that opportunity. I think teams like Syracuse did a great job at that. Iowa State with their second copy of Genti did another example. For funny enough, Washington, when they got their copy of Travion, which is right around market rate, but in Pac-12 it was going so high. I think he he had said at one point in the auction, right after Travion came off the board, he's like, "Oh, thank God! I was sandbagging." They were like talking about the group as a whole, and he's like, I was sandbagging my thoughts on Travion Henderson because I didn't want anyone else to bid him up, but I really like that pick." And so it's just an interesting infatuation with the position, and I think some teams found a benefit. But I think you're right. Most of the teams that have a higher residual score found more value in where their wide receivers priced at, as well as some of the QBs got priced at.
Right.
So, all right, we're gonna close up here. We've gone through all the conferences. Lastly, is our next steps. We will be announcing likely here shortly our scheduling. There'll be a link on the MFL page. It's not gonna do this very well for me, but
I'll probably send out an email too. I've been trying to get better to at least the demographic of people that aren't checking MFL or what is the platform we use, Slack.
yes, like,
So I'm gonna try to email blast it out too, so that maybe we get some more participation in the scheduling.
but scheduling is the next thing that we do as a league. It'll kind of go over the summer period. People can use it as they want to. There is generally a big flurry at the beginning of this when it opens. But teams get the ability to schedule their non-conference game. If you're in a Power 5 conference, you also get to schedule 2 cross-conference games. You will need to start fielding requests from other teams, and you'll need to input them into a form. There's this whole module with some forms embedded in them. You'll need both you and your opponent to input the form individually. Each need to do it, and then it should pair up on the module and start showing listed teams. If there's a space that's green, that means that that team is available. If there's a pending application or one team put in the application but the other did not, then there will show a little pending icon. And then once confirmed, it'll look like what it is for the division schedule that's already set. Oh my gosh, come on now. But it'll just be like these teams. It'll show that schedule. The other thing to note is that right now we'll be doing rivalries too. As a reminder, you can do 2 total rivalries as a group. They carry over year, so if you already have 2 rivalries, you don't need to worry about this. But there will be a rivalry form. You can set a wager on what the rivalry is worth. So the winner gets that dollar amount from the other team's next year's recruiting budget. So there's a little competition in this. You need to do the same things as scheduling. If there's teams that you want to schedule your rivalry with, they will need to also put a reciprocal entry in. And once that's in there, that'll be set. If you are setting a rivalry, you will still have to set a schedule appointment unless it's a division opponent. But this is entirely optional. Both things are entirely optional. If you don't set anything, you will be given a schedule regardless. By the league, it'll be set randomly. And then you won't get any rivalries or have any wagers or anything like that. That's an entirely different optional thing. So something to look forward to. I will say there is a big component and potential value in just taking some time to plan who you want to play. As a reminder, we got a lot of heat last year on this, and I'm not wavering on how we do the rankings, but rankings is based on how well your team scores, your wins, as well as how strong of an opponent you play that week. So there is some value in trying to be strategic if you are a team that's looking to contend, or if you're a team that's not looking to contend. You get dollars for recruiting next year based on the number of wins you get. So there may not be much value for you to try and play tougher teams, play cupcakes, try to get wins. Those help you. You can also, if you stack enough cupcakes up, you might get enough for a bowl game invitation. So be on the lookout for that. If you have questions, please ask us. Lou, if you have any um, little thing to say about the scheduling, yeah, just you can say that now, and then we'll close up here.
No, I mean, I think it's one of those things where the people that know it are going to take advantage of it. The people that don't aren't. Um, so but I would say that maybe it's just like one of those pivotal points where you have to like decide the direction of your team for the season. And so when you do your scheduling, if you're trying to schedule later because you suck, or you're trying to schedule later to get bowl games, or schedule heavy, kind of go all in. Um, just take kind of, you know, 2 seconds to look into that stuff, because there are other variables in play. Week 14 buys,
Yeah,
bye weeks in
bye weeks in
general. Like
general.
if you're looking to schedule up with somebody, and I say if you only have one quarterback and your quarterback's a bye week 6, maybe try to match up with somebody that also has a bye, similar situation as you, or whatever it is. It's not week 6, but whatever weeks we can schedule. 4, 4 is a bye week. I think 5 is a bye week.
5 weeks of bye
So when
week.
you
Yep.
do that stuff, um, try to match that stuff up, because again, at the end of the day, Brian's not changing that schedule or that scheduling component in the standings. I don't know how to do it, so for the rankings, so I have no intentions of doing it. So it's just one of those things where it's like, the more information you have, the better decision you make. You put yourself in a better situation moving forward. Um, that's probably the only kind of thing that I have to say about it. But I'd also then, when you make those decisions about your team, I'd also then match up the corresponding, like when we get into red shirts and things like that. If you're building it, if you're deciding early on that you're a team that's gonna, try to be cupcake or try to do this, then match your red shirts to that stuff. There's too many teams that suck, know they're gonna suck, don't schedule, and then don't do anything else. So I would just kind of match all of that stuff up so it makes sense with like a, because that's where you get your timeline, messed up and stuff like that. So I just pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, and there's a channel in Slack called scheduling. If that's where a lot of people do their facilitating of who they're playing. So if you're new to the league and looking to ask around for who wants to play, that's probably the best venue to do that. It's a public channel, so you can just see it anyway and
Will
get there.
we make Matthew do his rankings soon? When does that come out? So that might be an easy way for people to just match up. Like, here's teams that, because I know we don't do it.
Hmm.
At least I don't think we do. Projecting, teams,
If
strength
Matthew
of,
if Matthew wants to do it, he can. I always leave it up to him if that's something he wants to pull from MFL. So we can talk if the Martin metric is going to make a reappearance because
yeah.
you're
So
right. It does. It's
if it
not
does,
a
it might help.
yeah.
It
It's not
might
a
be a tool that
precise
helps you
thing.
kind of match up with, give you an idea where your team sits, and then also like who sits around your team, so that you don't like accidentally schedule like a Wisconsin when you're Toledo.
He wishes he couldn't schedule Wisconsin even if he wanted to.
He probably can't even schedule Notre Dame now.
Nope, definitely not. He's not getting my time of day. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Lou. I had a blast during the auction. I think you did too. It
Yeah, it
was
was one
our
of the more fun, honestly, across the board. One of the more fun just auctions being a part of the Big 12 auction, like I said, is always nuts. So, I mean, that was good. But then, I was literally cracking up with some of the stuff that we hit on, like Joey being hammered, somehow ending up with Shedeur Sanders when the night before he told us that there was no way
Yeah.
that Shedeur Sanders would go for $20, and Joey spent $20 on Shedeur, and then I think Oregon State and Pac-12, freaking out about UCLA. That was fantastic. I mean, there was so many different like. I think Luigi had one where he had somebody reset in the last minute, and it was just a fun kind of uh, just atmosphere. I really, honestly, quite enjoyed the auction.
Yep. All right, we will catch everyone later. Hopefully, everyone enjoys this. It's fun to recap it all, and we will kind of get into a lull after scheduling here until the season starts. So more to come, but we'll end it there.